Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Taylor's EV live on YouTube. It's our first live stream of the year, actually. I'm sorry, I know I wanted to do this sooner, but there's been so much news. EV news keeps piling up taller and taller and taller for me. So we're actually, as a apology for not streaming last week, we're going to be doing two streams this week. The next one should be a bit more interesting. I've convinced my good friend Mike, who has a Rivian R1S, to join us. So if all goes according to plan, I won't be alone on the next stream. It'll be me and Mike talking about Rivian or whatever you guys feel like asking about. He's got lots of thoughts on the EV market space, on Rivian and Tesla and Elon and Aptera. So me and him, we love talking EVs. We were just hanging out recently. So if you have any Rivian owner specific questions, save those for Friday's live stream because that's when we should be streaming again. But before we dive more into that, I figured we should address the channel members' questions because I have made you guys wait for far too long. Starting with Ivan, though, he asked this. He asked this about 5 days ago. He said, "When the heck are we getting actual V4 superchargers?" Which is a decent question. "And why are some legacy automakers getting access to 12,000 superchargers and others say 15,000? I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the companies that have said they are getting access to 12,000 are getting it via an adapter early this year, which should mean any day now. So there should be lots of things to talk about, hopefully with NACS adapters becoming available for CCS vehicles. That should be literally any day, starting with Ford, GM, Rivian as well. In the companies that have said they'll have access to 15,000 superchargers are the companies that have said they're not going to access until 2025. Not everybody who's announced NAC support has said it in the exact same way. So the earlier companies like Ford, General Motors, and Rivian have all said they're going to have access to superchargers via an adapter in 2024. So they say 12,000. And then other companies like Volkswagen and Lucid, I believe they've said they will have access to NACS in 2025. I think they've said there will be an adapter, but also they will accommodate for the NACS port on the vehicle itself. So I think the running theory, the running conclusion from that is most companies are expecting there to be about 15,000 V3 slash V4 superchargers in 2025. So the number's a little bit higher if your timeline is pushed out a little bit further. But as the question for when are we getting actual V4 superchargers? My hope would be this year, just because this year is when superchargers are really at scale going to start opening up for non-Teslas. And there's a lot of non-Teslas out there that are based on higher voltage architectures. But now even we're getting Cybertrucks, which are on the 800 volt architecture. And Lars, Tesla's head of engineering, has told us that the Cybertruck can support up to 350 kilowatts with V4 superchargers. But of course, we've only seen V4 dispensers, although I haven't even really seen anybody attempt to plug in a Cybertruck to a V4 supercharger, but I feel like if there was a difference in performance, we would have seen it by now. So far, I haven't seen anybody be able to pull more than 254 kilowatts on a Cybertruck. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of great Cybertruck content out there. I've been saying Cybertruck review win. I would love to check one out. I've been in contact with several followers of this channel that have said they're getting a Foundation Series Cybertruck. They just haven't received it yet. So I hate to, toot my own horn. Well, what am I kidding? I love talking about when I'm right because I'm not right very much. I'm not right all the time, but I think I do recall saying last year that I believed the early launch edition Cybertrucks could easily be $100,000 plus, which turned out to be true. And I also said that I believed that Cybertruck deliveries would pretty much just be for employees for most of 2023. And then 2024 was when actual customer deliveries would begin. That I'm cherry picking here, of course, but that aspect of what I guessed seems to be the case. Most people with Cybertrucks right now are employees. I think there's a handful of celebrities like Pharrell and Mr. Williams. That's all I remember about. It's Serena Williams' husband got a Cybertruck. So I'm just calling him Mr. Williams because I don't know what his first name is. But there's a handful of celebrities that got the Cybertruck. and mostly employees other outside of that. And I can understand why Tesla employees are probably hesitant to let YouTubers check out their car or with much detail, so they're kind of keeping it a little under the wraps. But there's definitely been a lot of great YouTubers, like from the Out of Spec channel, that have documented the Cybertruck. I've been watching Cybertruck 70 is another YouTuber that has gotten a Cybertruck and is reviewing it. Our Cyber Life is fantastic. I almost got to meet up with him, but it was just a scheduling thing. It was a little too last minute for me, so I wasn't able to check out his. But I was very close to. Um, it only takes a Cybertruck to be true. That's all it has to do. That's all it takes, I guess. But yeah, there's a lot of great channels reviewing Cybertrucks out there that have gone into. Ryan Shaw, I heard, also did a great Cybertruck in-depth review. So the truth is, there's not going to be much left for me to document. Basically, I'm kind of handing off the baton. I did a lot of Cybertruck leaks and rumors coverage, but now, of course, the channels who are able to get one up close and review it, or rent one on Turo, willing to spend the $1,000. Those are other guys that have more money than I do that can afford to do that kind of thing. They're obviously going to have more up close and personal footage and more real world data on the Cybertruck than I'm going to be able to get. So at this point, I could, rent one for $1,000, or I could fly out to one or do a huge road trip. But the truth is, my coverage of it is not going to be that different from what everybody else is already doing. Um, it's kind of moving on. I'm no longer going to be the Cybertruck guy, I think, from here on out, just because there's actual Cybertruck owners now, and those channels, honestly, I think right now are going to have a lot of internet traffic and a lot of people interested in what they have to report on because they actually own one. But as time goes on, similar to what we saw happen with the first Model 3 owners and then the first Model Y owners, you generate a lot of traffic and you get a lot of attention when the vehicle is new and just came out. But then the more of them that are delivered, the less special it is and the more boring the content becomes. And I'm already kind of seeing that on my channel. Cybertruck videos used to be my best performing videos. Now, when I talk about the Cybertruck, it doesn't really perform all that great. And I think a lot of it is just reality setting in. Before the big Cybertruck launch event and the website refresh, there was a lot of people interested and hyped for the Cybertruck because, wrongfully, in my opinion, a lot of them were expecting it to be a $50,000, $60,000 vehicle. Even though I kept reiterating over and over again, guys, this is going to be $100,000 vehicle. This is not going to be cheap. It's not going to have high range. The energy density of the 4680 cells is not there yet. I don't think they're going to be able to do a 500-mile range variant. And a lot of people, I think, liked watching my videos saying I didn't think that was going to happen because they wanted me to be wrong, or they wanted Tesla to pull through and surpass expectations, and they really didn't. So a bunch of people lost interest in the Cybertruck once the real range numbers came out, once the real prices came out, and they said, okay, you know what? I guess this vehicle isn't really for me. I thought it was going to be, but they were holding out hope that Tesla was going to pull a rabbit out of the hat, and they didn't really. They did exactly what I basically expected them to do. Was they knew that production capacity was low and demand was high, which is why you charge people whatever you're going to charge them. And honestly, in many ways, the Cybertruck was quite a bit worse than I was anticipating because, as the chat was mentioning earlier, we still don't have autopilot. We don't even have basic autopilot on the Cybertruck. And I recall making several videos about how I don't think Tesla is going to honor your FSD price lock. A bunch of people were like, "Oh no, I reserved my Cybertruck for $7,000 FSD back when it first came out." And yes, they have to honor that, and I kept saying, they really don't. If you read the Cybertruck pre-order agreement, there's nothing in there claiming that they have to honor the FSD pricing, because it's purely just everything that was listed on the website was ballpark estimated pricing. None of it was contractual. None of it was locked in. So many people were convinced that the $100 refundable deposit they put down had some kind of magical binding agreement with Tesla. I don't know what it was. It did some kind of mental thing, dopamine hit when people look in their Tesla account and saw that Cybertruck there. And I kept saying that really guarantees you nothing. It doesn't guarantee you a spot in line. It doesn't guarantee you the price of the truck. It doesn't guarantee you the price of FSD. And people are like, no, no, Drew, they have to honor FSD. And now look at the Foundation Series pricing. It's like, okay, it includes FSD, but you have to spend an extra $20,000. Anybody who's done a breakdown on all of the things included with the Foundation pricing has concluded it is not worth the extra $20,000. You're paying that extra 20,000 because you want the truck sooner. That's all you're paying for. That doesn't guarantee you a lower FSD price. Even if you factor in everything included with Foundation Series, it's still assuming that FSD is $12,000, which that's what it costs. That's not what it's worth, in my opinion. But $1,000 to rent it seems worth it, in my opinion. Go for it, Ivan. I'm not stopping you. For me, it is not worth it. Just I can tell you by how much money my channel generates. I know there's a lot of bigger channels out there that you probably think make a bunch of money on their videos, but in reality, there's a lot of Tesla YouTubers specifically that actually make most of their money from other things. A lot of them are not full-time YouTubers. There's a lot of big Tesla YouTubers out there that were able to afford their Teslas and buy their Teslas through full-time professions and full-time salaries they got through other things. And YouTube is just a side hustle. So all the money they generate from YouTube, they spend on, you know, rentals or equipment. Whereas, at least in my line of work, this is all I do. I don't have another income. It's just purely YouTube. And I would not make my money back. I would be out money. It would be cool to check out a Cybertruck, but I just know that it's a very high production intended vehicle. Eventually, they're going to be everywhere, and I'm sure I'm going to be able to check out one of them for free at some point. Um, yeah, go check Turo, do it yourself. Sunny Patel says you're the Aptera slash solar and efficiency guy now. Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of what I've gotten more interested in as the years have gone by. I'm very grateful that the Aptera content has done as well as it has, because honestly, the Aptera is far more interesting and compelling to me than the Cybertruck. The Cybertruck was always cool and edgy and fun to talk about because it was so weird and unique, but I had to remind people on various occasions over the years, I never reserved one. At no point did I ever put a deposit down on one. I never really genuinely considered buying one, even when the original pricing was unveiled. $40,000, even back then, I knew I wasn't a pickup truck guy. Um, I was more of an efficiency guy. That was the main reason I was more interested in the Model 3 than any other Tesla. And cost thing is a far more interesting argument to me, because mainly I see in my personal life, like, there's a lot of people that love EVs, and there's a lot of people that want to get into electric vehicles and they want to own one. I can't tell you how many friends and family members I've talked to that are fascinated by electric vehicles and ask me about my Tesla and want to get more into EVs, but they can't. Not because there's not the right pickup truck, not because of the range, not because of the charging, but simply because of the price. That keeps coming up. That keeps coming at, like, oh, I can't afford that. That's still too high for me. Or it's like I can't charge from home, so that's going to be a lot less practical for me. So the Aptera, to me, I've talked to so many more personal friends and family members that have said, I can't justify an EV. I can't justify uh, spending that much, but if the Aptera makes it to market, I could totally see myself buying one of those. So to me, that whole electrification transition is far more compelling when we focus more on affordable models, or at least more EVs that cater to more specific markets. I'm actually kind of rethinking and reanalyzing the whole concept of Tesla diversifying their product lineup. I know Elon has said on multiple occasions that he doesn't think Tesla needs that many models. He thinks, Cybertruck and the sexy lineup pretty much covers it. They don't need to have that many models. And every day that goes by, I'm starting to disagree a little bit more. I'm starting to think, like, okay, we're reaching a point where, we've got a lot of Model Ys in inventory, and we got this Model 3 refresh that just came out, which is really cool. But honestly, like, the back orders for the new Model 3 aren't as drastic as I thought they were going to be. I wouldn't be shocked if they re-add the Model 3 to the referral program within a couple weeks, because it turns out that, they were expecting the Model 3 refresh to be this huge demand lever, And I'm sure it was a demand lever that was fairly effective. A lot of people, I'm confident, ordered it, but I'm wondering if it didn't bring in the huge wave of demand that they were originally expecting, primarily due to cost, because it doesn't qualify for the tax credit and the Model Y does. So a lot of people are going to be far more interested in the crossover because crossovers sell incredibly well. And a lot of people, I think, are just going to want the cheapest vehicle with NACS possible. And right now, that's the Model Y. And I know a lot of people, specifically my sister, that, is more in the market for a more roomy three-row SUV. And everything I've seen from Tesla shows that they're not that interested in building, a Cyber SUV or a variant of the Cybertruck that sits 7 to 8 people. And I think there's a huge market for it, honestly. Look at the Rivian R1S sales. I was tweeting about that this morning. R1S is outselling the R1T, you know, 2 to 1, maybe more than 2 to 1. R1S was in the top 10 best-selling EVs in the United States, and there's no other vehicle close to the R1S's pricing on that list. Um, or that was close to the R1S. It was basically a bunch of lower priced crossovers followed by the R1S. So obviously Model Y, Model 3 are the best sellers. And then after that, Chevy Bolt makes sense. It's very cheap. And then the Mustang Mach-E, then the ID4, then the Ioniq 5. And then after all of those, $40,000, $50,000 crossovers, we immediately jump to the R1S, which is a $80,000, $90,000 SUV. After taxes and stuff, it's more like $100,000 SUV. So there's a lot of demand. The market in the US, we could argue whether or not it's justified, but there's a lot of demand in the US for three-row full-size SUVs, not crossovers, not Model Y seven-seaters, but like, big three-row models. And nothing I've seen from Tesla indicates they're close to bringing that to market. They have no interest in offering another three-row SUV that's not the Model X, and the Model X isn't as selling as well as the R1S, even though it's cheaper. You can get a Model X for much, much cheaper than the R1S, and the R1S is still in the lead. Diraj B, thank you for the super chat. What's my opinion on Hyundai Ioniq 6 versus Tesla Model 3? Thank you for the super chat. That's very kind of you. And also, it's funny that you bring that up because I was actually looking at Ioniq 6s recently. I love the efficiency of them. I know a lot of people don't like the design. I'm personally a huge fan of it. I've seen several Ioniq 6s in the wild. I haven't like test drove one, but I've parked next to them and gotten footage of them, and I've seen them around town and that kind of thing. I really like the look personally. I'm a fan of that super aerodynamic shape. Um, and I like that the rear-wheel drive variant can go, at least according to the EPA, close to 360 miles. That's great. My biggest issue with the Ioniq 6 is the software. I've watched a lot of reviews on the Ioniq 6, and every time I see that GMP software, I'm disappointed. It's so clunky. The route planning is crap. And also, of course, the Ioniq 6 still uses CCS. And to me, CCS is very much a no-go right now, at least on vehicles that don't have their own charging infrastructure, like Hyundai and Kia don't have their own charger network. Rivian, I'm willing to excuse a little bit for now, even though they have CCS, because Rivian is actually deploying at pretty decent scale their adventure network. Like I plugged in my most common road trip route, which is from my place to my parents' place out of state, which is about 800 miles. It's a pretty long drive. I've done it 3 or 4 times in this car now. And I plugged in that route on a better route planner, and 3 out of the 5 stops were at Rivian Adventure Chargers, which I've talked to my friend Mike, who owns the Rivian R1S, and he said, yeah, the Rivian Adventure Network is by far the best charging experience for Rivians. Makes sense. If the auto manufacturer builds their own chargers, that experience is going to be the most clean, the most ironed out. I've suggested everybody should do that. I said, if you're making EVs, you should probably make your own charging infrastructure because that will always have an inherent exclusive advantage to your brand and to the software than relying on a third-party network. And the Ioniq 6, unfortunately, has to rely on Electrify America, which has consistently proven to be a nightmare of an experience. It's a joke. It's unreliable. It's slow. And um, the data suggests that like 1 out of every 3 or 4 charging sessions with EA has a charging fault or a slower than expected charge rate, or the site says it's online when it's not. So Ioniq 6, I love the vehicle itself, except the software, of course, I think could use some work. I don't like the interior more than a Model 3 or a Rivian. I prefer having one big center display. The Ioniq 6 prices don't look too bad, but that's the other problem with them. I don't think they're building that many. And I looked around on Hyundai's website. It's very hard to find the vehicle that I think all of us want. Nobody's that interested in buying the Ioniq 6 for the uh, all-wheel drive or the performance models, or even the standard range model is not that great. I think everybody that wants the Ioniq 6 wants the long-range rear-wheel drive variant because that one can go 360 miles. That sounds the most impressive, and none of the performance metrics from the other Ioniq 6 trims are that good. So when you look around for inventory on the Ioniq 6, I can't find the one we all want. We all want the long range rear wheel drive, but all I can find in inventory is the all wheel drive variants, which have worse range, worse efficiency. Honestly, it's weird how big the gap is between here's the range on the rear wheel drive, and here's the range on the all wheel drive. It's like, ew, you take quite a big efficiency hit. The problem is they're making too many variants of the Ioniq 6, and most of the variants are not that compelling. The only compelling one is the long range rear wheel drive, and that's the one that they don't have anywhere. It's super hard to find any of them in stock. Um, Obviously, I think the people who really, really like the Ioniq 6 all bought that one, so it's hard to find them. And of course, you have to go through a dealer network, and dealers have markups and that kind of thing. So there's aspects of the Ioniq 6 I really like, but not a Tesla threat, not a legitimate competitor to any kind of, I don't know, real high volume EV. I've seen a few Rivian, Amazon, and FedEx GM delivery vans around my area. Oh, that's cool. Hey, I think that's Rivian Mike in the chat. Looking forward to Friday. I'm sure that I will learn a great deal and viewers will be entertained by an old man's perspective. Absolutely. We need some old man perspective. um I'm adding you as a moderator so I can identify you. But yeah, I see Rivian Mike in the chat. Thanks for tuning in. I'm in Europe and I'm afraid Aptera won't be available in the near future, so I would buy a Model 3 for the time being. Makes sense. I would sell as soon as I get my Aptera. Yeah, I mean that's kind of the boat I'm in right now. I'm most interested in the Aptera over any EV, and in the meantime, I wanted the cheapest possible slash most efficient EV I could get with NACS, and we knew we wanted to buy the car in 2022, so this was it. This was basically the cheapest car with NACS we could get. Um, Let's see. Check Cybertruck on Turo. Wow, that guy is taking a lot of risk if it gets into an accident and can't be repaired for a long time. Yeah, but he's gonna make a lot of money off of it. I think most people will probably keep it friendly. You know, it's funny you brought up the Aptera in Europe because I was concerned about that for a while too. I was like, a lot of people on the Aptera accelerator program are not in the United States. How's that going to work if the Aptera is primarily optimized with the NACS port and it's meant for the U.S. market? Then I realized Aptera has the most universal charging method in the world, solar integrated in the vehicle. That means that even if you take a US made Aptera that is built for the US market with NACS and, everything, if you ship that vehicle to Europe, to Singapore, to China, to Australia, wherever, sure, you might have to find some weird adapters for your charge ports in whatever country you're in. However, you can still charge your Aptera via the sun. Sure, it's not going to be a great DC fast charging experience, but the launch edition has a 400-mile range, so that does cover a lot of driving um, without having to stop and charge. And at the end of the day, wherever you are, you're probably going to be able to charge via sunlight, and you can do that anywhere. Which you can't really say the same thing about any other EV, right? It's like, oh, well, you're going to have to find your own solar and then you got to convert it and find a NACS port in your country, which might be rare if NACS is not the standard where you live. So that's kind of the cool thing about Aptera is it's got the most universal charging, which is just solar. If I had it my way, the vehicles the size of the R1S should be illegal. Yeah, good luck with that. I don't think that's happened in the US. Um, CCS is the lightning port of electric vehicles in the US. Yeah, I think if you're relying purely on Electrify America, it's going to be a lot harder to swallow that EV in the long run. Rivian, I think, will be a little bit more okay because they're building out their adventure network. Um, so I'm willing to I'm willing to give them a little bit of a pass on it, but it should get easier as well with Tesla V4 superchargers supporting the Magic Dock. So you should be able to just pull out the CCS adapter and plug it into wherever. I was disappointed to miss the last live stream because I've been wanting to pick your brain on hybrids for as long as I've been a subscriber, and that was as big a topic on that stream. Yeah, sorry, I've talked to a lot of people about hybrids, and I've pretty much looked at it from every possible angle, and I genuinely just don't think it's a great idea. I haven't had someone convince me otherwise yet. I think the best argument I've seen in favor of hybrids is probably like the Ram charger concept, where it's like, okay, you need a ton of range because you're towing, but you're cross country towing only occasionally, and then the rest of the year just you just need enough battery to charge to get around town. So if you made an electric truck that could also take gas for long distance towing, I was like, yeah, that's probably the best argument I've seen, but even that one is not great because the Ram Charger, they didn't talk about pricing, and I don't think the demand for it is going to be particularly high because it's a distorted market. It's like, okay, you're catering to people who want an EV, but also want long distance towing and also are comfortable buying gas. Buying gas eats into the cost advantages of switching to electric in the first place, and hybrids tend to be fairly expensive. My Tesla Weekend is another great YouTuber I watch. He's talked about hybrids as well because he cross shopped them a lot before eventually buying his Tesla. And they realized that, there's a lot of complexity. If you have to have an electric motor and a battery pack capable of, AC or DC charging, and also having a combustion engine, that adds complexity. Now you've got a battery to maintain and an engine to maintain. Um, so the amount of money you save by going with a hybrid versus the amount of money you have to spend on one, usually the break even point is never. You end up spending more on a hybrid because it's more expensive than an all gas car. Maybe it's not quite as expensive as a full EV, but that point is debatable now because of how cheap Model Ys and Model 3s are getting. It's honestly, I've been looking in the used and new vehicle market. I have not seen hybrids undercut Teslas. Maybe they undercut other EVs, but you can find Model 3s and Model Ys used now for the low 30,000s or below 30,000s, and you're going to have a hard time finding a plug-in hybrid new that's cheaper than that. Yeah, hybrids are kind of the worst of both worlds. The only advantage of hybrids really is just extreme range. I would say a hybrid is better than an all gas vehicle because I like EVs, but they're not better than an all EV. And also, the bigger problem with hybrids that we've established in more recent history is demand. On paper, yes, we can argue that there's advantages in weight and in efficiency to having a gas tank and an electric motor. Sure, like on paper, you can say, hey, well, technically, it uses less batteries, which results in less emissions because there's less raw materials mined. If we put, 15 kilowatt hour battery packs in every car with a gas motor instead of 60 to 80 kilowatt hour battery packs in each car, that reduces the carbon footprint to manufacture it. Yeah, I can see that argument, but at the end of the day, a lot of people don't want a hybrid. The demand for full electric vehicles is far higher than it is for plug-in hybrids. And the data also suggests that most people who buy plug-in hybrids, they do not plug them in. They just rely on gas. Because if you're interested or on board with the concept of charging a battery and maintaining a battery and just using the battery, you're more likely to buy an EV than you are a hybrid because if you are interested in batteries and plugging them in and just relying on that, you're going to buy an all EV. You're not going to buy a plug-in hybrid. So, yeah, it's an interesting science project to try to meet in the middle, but the demand isn't there for it. The pricing of it doesn't really make much sense, and market research has shown that most people just keep buying gas when they buy plug-in hybrids. Um, are simpler than pure gas cards. Transmissions are more complex than just generating electricity. Yeah, I know a lot of people like the Chevy Volt, but they don't make it anymore. And I think there's a reason. Sure, it was probably cost effective for the consumer, but it probably wasn't cost effective for GM. 9 times out of 10, if there's a high in demand product that a lot of people like that they stop making, it's because it's not profitable. That's the only other. If it was profitable and high in demand, they would have kept making it. There's no reason to stop making it. Um, Hybrids are the worst of both. Buying gas on road trips is the same as DC fast charging costs. A Ram charger loses nothing on cost when needing to fill up on the road. Uh, it I'd say it's debatable. I mean, there is a toss up, I guess, when you're towing, but um, again, we don't know the price of the Ram charger. So how much is a full gas Ram pickup going to cost versus the Ram charger? The Ram charger is still going to require gas and has a good chance of costing about the same as a full EV. My biggest concern with the Ram charger, partially, I don't think they're going to build that many of them because it's probably not going to be very profitable, but um, it still has like 100 kilowatt hour battery pack, which is not small. You know, that's bigger than a lot of full electric EVs. So having a gas generator and a 100 kilowatt hour battery pack, and you know, gasoline can't just sit for months at a time. So you're still going to have a gas engine to maintain and keep care, watch out for oil changes, that kind of thing. Um, ice part is just a generator to recharge the battery. That kind of makes sense, but you still end up needing a pretty large battery. You might as well just be pure EV. Yeah, I mean gas generators, I get that they're simpler than a transmission, but they're still an engine. Um, hybrids are better than full EVs, but for me, I live in an apartment and can't charge a Tesla in my parking lot, so I feel like a hybrid is a step in the right direction. Yeah, it's definitely halfway there. Um, but yeah, I think the bigger issue that I hope Aptera is able to alleviate a lot of is being able to charge uh, just via sunlight instead of having, a garage to plug into. A lot of people live in apartment buildings and can't charge from home. If you're purely relying on DC fast charging, then yeah, the um, cost advantages of an EV are not that great. But then the bigger debate is, well, can you get EVs to be price competitive with gas cars up front, which right now we're kind of seeing. We're reaching a point where you can get Teslas for about the price as a new gas car or less, depending on the dealer markups. And therefore, you could buy an EV and it's not necessarily cheaper than a gas car, but it's probably more enjoyable. A lot of people prefer uh, the safety, the low center of gravity, the quietness, the acceleration, the connected aspect of it, the software, the self-driving tech, all that. A lot of people, including myself, have bought Teslas not because they save money on them. I know for a fact I'm never gonna, you know, break even on this car purchase. It's always going to be cheaper. Well, not always, but for now, it's definitely cheaper to continue buying cheap used gas cars, which is what I used to do. We bought the Tesla, which was far, far more expensive than any other car I had previously purchased, but it was because I knew that owning an EV would be more delightful and more comfortable than owning a gas car. It doesn't necessarily have to be smartphones outperformed flip phones, not because they were cheaper, right? It's like if they're just a better overall experience and they're more enjoyable, a lot of people will spend the extra money, which is kind of what we're seeing. The main problem is the misinformation about EVs that scares many people into never researching or considering one over a hybrid. I don't think hybrids is the competitor personally. Hybrid sales are honestly not that high if you look at most popular selling vehicles in the United States. Full gas cars are still far more popular than hybrids, and EVs are selling higher than hybrids. Plug-in hybrids, I think, are more niche than people realize. Um, they think they're the next best thing, but I mean, sure, they're the next best thing, but they're not the next best selling thing, in my opinion, from what I've seen. Yeah, misinformation with EVs is a problem, but I don't think it's the biggest personally. I think costs still, I mean, it's not wrong what you're saying. Misinformation is definitely a problem. I see people all the time that think all EV batteries explode or the battery needs to be replaced very quickly. But from what I've gathered from the people I've spoken with that believe that kind of thing, I think it's more confirmation bias than it is genuine misinformation. As in, they're people that are hesitant to change and they don't like, I mean, there's politics involved with EVs, unfortunately, because there's a lot of government mandates and there's a lot of people that are like, oh, the government wants me to switch to an EV, but I got my gas car and I want to keep using. So they don't want to, they're hesitant to anything that's different. So they will basically believe and latch onto with anything that supports their viewpoint, which is, I don't think I need to change what I'm doing. Gas is fine. I want to just keep using gas because that's what I'm used to and that's what I'm comfortable with. So it's not that they genuine like if they see a report that says actually EV batteries are very reliable and you don't have to replace them for hundreds of thousands of miles, and they're actually very safe. They do not catch on fire as much as gas vehicles do. Um, they could see those reports and still go, yeah, but I don't really care. Oh, but this report claims the battery does catch on fire. I'm going to believe that one because it fits my confirmation bias. So I think there's just some natural hesitancy towards the transition anyway. And those people, I mean, a lot of people I see in the Tesla community are convinced that we can fight EV misinformation with advertising. I don't believe that because I believe it's a confirmation bias problem. If Tesla spends a bunch of money on a Super Bowl commercial saying that batteries don't catch on fire, I don't think that's going to change the minds of people that are against EVs. I think what's far more likely to influence them is to outnumber them. I think it's to surround them with friends and family members that do have EVs, and the longer they own them and the longer they like if I told like the example I'm thinking of sounds like my usual conversation with my wife. What's that mean? Sounds like my wife. uh, no, like I'm thinking of family members in my personal life. My uncle or my family. My I have some cousins and stuff that are like, yeah, but those batteries, how long does that really last? He knows I have an EV, and he's probably thinking in the back of my mind, I'm gonna have a big battery bill in a couple of years and that kind of thing. But if I slowly start surrounding my family members with more EV owners and more members of the family that are interested in EVs and want to own one but can't because they're too expensive, but they make the switch because they get more affordable. I have both sides of the spectrum on my family. We've got some cousins that are getting ready to buy EVs, and I've got some uncles that own EVs. And then I've got other uncles that don't want to own EVs and are skeptical of the charging and the infrastructure and all that. If if I outnumber them and they start realizing, okay, all my family members have owned EVs and they've been driving them for 5, 6 now or 10 plus years. None of them have had a big battery repair bill and all of them are road tripping and charging them just fine. If they feel outnumbered in their personal life, I think they're more likely to cave in than if they watch a commercial from Tesla, because obviously a commercial from Tesla is going to be biased. Of course, Tesla wants me to buy an EV because they're Tesla. But if my family members are not even being very pushy about it, but they just continuously are owning and driving around EVs and having a great time with it, then I think they'll feel like, okay, well, there must be some truth to this. I think real world evidence or watching YouTubers that are not sponsored by Tesla reviewing the car and saying good things about it, that's a far stronger recommendation than any advertisement could ever be. Um, you can't logic someone out of a position they didn't logic themselves into. Yeah, exactly. I don't, if people were basing EV knowledge off of information, then they would understand that EVs are safe and reliable and consistent. And, like if someone has a belief about EVs being dangerous, or, like the battery goes bad, or I've seen some people say that they're radioactive and they give you cancer, you're not going to reason with that person out of it. You're not going to send them the right news articles. Right. You can't logic someone out of it. I had to wait months to get my Camry hybrid, much as like you did for Model 3, so I'm sure how you can say the demand for hybrids isn't there. Well, I'm just talking about best-selling unit volume. So maybe you had to wait a long time for your hybrid, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's a high demand for it. That also just means they're not building that many of them, or the spec you wanted was not particularly high in demand. But if you just look up, best-selling vehicles in the United States, hybrids are not high on the list. I mean, what's on the highest of the list is F-150, Silverado, Ram 1500. The top three are all pickup trucks, and they're not the hybrid variants. Then after that is the Model Y, um, and then after that is probably uh, Toyota RAV4. There's a hybrid variant of it, but I don't think that's the best seller. Uh, Work the Fear, very popular. Yeah, it's very easy to scare someone out of a purchase. It's very hard to tell someone that their fears are unjustified. Um, I can't believe how many people talk about battery replacement costs. Do they know how much an engine costs? Yeah, I've seen that on Twitter a lot. It seems like online I'm more likely to find people who believe that than in person. I don't see a lot of people in person that believe the battery needs to be replaced after 50,000 miles, but I've seen online a lot. People are like, engine replacement cost is not a necessity. Battery replacement cost is 100% necessity after X many years, which isn't true. But it's natural to assume that because we don't have a lot of data yet. EVs are still a relatively new thing. They haven't been around. Full EVs that are capable of, DC fast charging, long range EVs is what I'm referring to. We don't have long term data on it. I mean, the longest we have is basically like the 2012 Model S. That's only 12 years old. And the data is looking pretty good so far, but there definitely are some early Teslas that needed their batteries to be replaced, early Model S's that didn't have the best battery management systems with early cells. So if you just look at that data and you say, oh, see, look, all those Model S's or a decent number of Model S's needed their batteries replaced, but not all of them. And of course, as battery chemistries got better and as battery management systems got better, cycle life has improved. And I can refer to you to several YouTube videos that have documented Model 3s and Ys with 200,000, 300,000 miles on them, and they're on the original battery pack and they don't have much degradation. So it's still pretty early, but yeah, you can get a good Japanese engine with low miles, keep going. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of cost advantages at this point to buying cheap used gas cars. And the amount of money you spend extra on an EV is not going to compete with used gas, but it is more, I think, cost competitive than buying new gas cars. Um, New gas cars are not that cheap, honestly. Looking around dealer markets and stuff, I'm like, why are people still buying these? It's what they're familiar with. A lot of people are not interested in learning, and advertisements I don't think will suddenly make them more open-minded to, oh, let me learn more about how kilowatts versus kilowatt hours work and energy efficiency and preconditioning the battery and charging to 80% versus 100% and chemistry thing and the charging curve of the battery pack. There's a lot of stuff like that. People are just like, I don't care. I don't want to have to learn new stuff. I want to just keep no. That's why so many people buy iPhones, because they just want to keep using what they're comfortable with and what they're used to. They don't want to have to relearn things, and that's just natural human nature. Um, so I don't blame them when there's a lot of new things to learn, even with Teslas, which are the easiest EVs to own, because they just work. You just buy them, you get in them, and you drive, and the car tells you where to charge and how long to charge. It's the most plug and play EV you can buy. I honestly think a lot of people should probably start with a Tesla. I'm definitely not saying you should only buy Teslas, but if you're new to EVs and you want it to be simple and work reliably, like if you're recommending an EV to a family member that's not that great with computers or technology, like my parents, for example, I would be much more inclined to recommend them get a Tesla before any other EV simply because I know how simple they are and they know that they can just plug in a destination and go instead of having to fuss around with route planning and here's how Electrify America works and you got to download an app and you got to plug it in this way and then you got to charge it and then hit initiate charging and then a problem comes up. If you're a more of an EV enthusiast, I think you can be more open to non-Teslas because they take a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more creativity. But Kyle O'Connor proceeds to unearth a 10-year-old Coda that still has a working LFP battery pack. Wonder what the degradation on it is like. Yeah, it that battery pack is interesting because it probably obviously has a huge calendar life, but probably not a very high cycle life. I think that EV had like 20, 30 miles on it or something. So probably had, you know, less than 5 cycles on the battery. So different kind of aging, but I personally think LFP batteries are the future, or sodium ion batteries have a lot of promise, um, depending on cycle life, but if the typical battery pack should have 200,000 plus mile lifespan, then those Hertz Model 3s are a pretty sweet deal, but the expiration of battery warranty at 100,000 miles is a daunting event horizon. Yeah, yeah, you're right, Tony. It's one of those things that's like where you're probably fine, but you can't necessarily say with 100% certainty that you're going to be totally fine. Um, there have been instances where EVs that were supercharged a lot and have a ton of cycles on the battery pack has been known to die out faster. And that's kind of the market that those Hertz Model 3s went through. A lot of usage. They went through a lot of miles in a short amount of time, and it was probably mostly supercharging. So I'd be hesitant with those Model 3s as well. Even though they're very cheap, I'd be very curious about how they age. I would totally subscribe to a channel who buys one of the, $14,000 Model 3s. I think I saw one as cheap as that. It's like, if you bought a used Model 3 for 14 grand, first of all, congratulations. That's an incredible deal. But I'm also very curious about the ownership of it. What's the cycle life? What's the service going to be like? Because out of warranty repair is going to be very problematic for Teslas, especially if the battery pack was abused. I think a lot of those Model 3s had LFP, so they should be fine. But I mean, it's 14 grand, right? So there's a lot of room for service visits in there. But Tesla's not a real, right to repair company, so servicing Teslas is probably going to be harder than something like the Aptera. But if your Model 3 needed a battery replacement, was out of warranty, would you replace it or buy a new Model 3? Yeah, I would just depend on the pricing, I guess. I would go towards whatever was cheaper. My guess is, first of all, that my battery is LFP, so I have a feeling it's going to last a long, long time. Um, Secondly, uh, I would have to ask, well, LFP batteries are supposed to be cheaper, so I would assume that an LFP battery replacement would be cheaper than what we've seen with the NMC battery replacements, which I haven't seen recently. There hasn't been a lot of them to report on because most Model 3s and Ys are still under warranty and very few people have needed battery replacements. So, um, I would guess that an LFP battery replacement would be cheaper. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty confident um I don't know what it would cost. Maybe it'd be like $8,000 or $9,000. Again, I don't think it would happen, but if it did, it would probably be cheaper than an NMC battery replacement, which most of the news surrounding those said they're like $15,000 if you do need one. But again, there's not a lot of data on that. Um, I'm not worried about it, to put it lightly. I'm more worried about little things breaking out of warranty. Like I've seen uh someone with a 2018 Model 3 that was out of warranty and their hardware 3 computer died, which was like, oh, I forgot that's a possibility. It was like they paid for full self-driving, right? And they were using full self-driving and then they had a hardware 3 computer failure. And because it was out of warranty, if they wanted to get the new hardware 3 FSD computer replaced, it was like $2,800. Not end of the world money, but still annoying that you save all this money on gas and then you have some little component like the full self-driving computer or the center display that's probably over $1,000 to fix. Headlight repair, luckily I have the matrix LED, so those should last a long time. But if one of my headlights goes out, it's probably going to be a $800-$900 repair. So obviously the best service is no service. That's the thing I like about EVs, is that the idea is hardly anything really goes bad on them. I mean, we've had little things like the seat sensor go bad, and then they couldn't replace the sensor, so they had to replace the whole seat under warranty. But there's definitely a part of me that's like, okay, if that seat sensor goes out and I'm not under warranty, what is that going to cost me? It kind of eats into your gas savings a bit. So obviously, best case scenario is the entry price of EVs goes down because obviously all vehicles, gas or electric, are probably going to have some kind of service. It obviously would be much nicer in the future to buy from a company that supports more right to repair, that supports more self-service, so that you can work on it yourself, or you can work on it through third-party auto shops that can price better than the first-party manufacturer does. And Tesla doesn't seem to be that open to that idea. They just want you to do everything through them. Um, my Model Y got rear-ended by someone. Oh no, I'm sorry. Um, so $18,000 to $22,000 if you qualify for and have the tax liability for used EV credit, which is a little bit of a squeeze. Um, yeah, that's impressive. It's really cool that you can get a EV for that. I agree. Um, Appreciate the info as always. Thank you, Tapia, Andy. Appreciate that. And Dad says he can handle it. That's good. Let me add you as a moderator so you don't get buried in the chat. A driver that couldn't parallel park took like a month to repair. Yikes. Yeah, that's not fun. Um, I don't think battery replacement cost is going to be a big thing in the future. I think what's far more likely is just using more high cycle life batteries, which even the NMC batteries are pretty good and can last hundreds of thousands of miles. Most people don't own cars for that long anyway. But even if they do, it's not like the battery is useless if it degrades 10% or 15%. It's like, yeah, you just stop a little bit more on road trips. That's all. Will I be extending my service agreement? Probably not, just because it's $1,800. But I will say that if they let me buy an extended warranty with referral credits, we would probably do that. If the debate is between referral, FSD versus extended warranty, we'd probably take extended warranty. Um, but so far, that's not an option. Basically, with the extended warranty, you're betting that you will have more than $1,800 worth of service within a 2-year period. I don't think we will, personally. And even if we did, okay, we broke even. But if we have $1,000 in service costs after the warranty expires, we still would save money by not buying the extended warranty. So I don't think we'll buy it, but um Iowa Tesla guy had a heat pump go bad out of warranty and it was 2,300. Yikes. See, that's what I'm not liking. That's what I'm feeling like the older I get or the longer we own EVs, the more I'm like, yeah, kind of buying brands that support more right to repair might start to make more sense. A lot more people might be interested in that, and that's making me like Aptera more and more every day. I'm surprised that Tesla doesn't offer what is that? Phone key disconnected. I wonder why that happened. Um, oh no, something else just broke in the car as we speak. Doesn't offer an extended battery warranty or battery insurance product for past 100,000 miles. Oh, I see what you're saying. So like your car gets really old, but you want to pay to protect the battery. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that it's more likely to need service after that point, so they don't want to cover it because it would probably be too good a deal for you. I don't know. Yeah, good question. Um, Yeah, the let me read the other question. We were kind of diving into this from Jackson Smith. Besides longer range, what would be some selling points Tesla and other manufacturers could use to entice customers to buy new models? We just got ventilated seats, ambient lighting, and a back screen seat for the Model 3, and I'm trying to think of new features that would make people feel more inclined to hold off buying if they weren't waiting for a specific feature. So that's a good question because we are kind of bumping up against demand. I do tend to think that the interest rates still do play a pretty massive factor in demand because I know I'm the kind of guy to buy a car outright in cash because I'm weird, but most people are not buying them outright in cash. Most people are financing cars, gas or electric, and interest rates has an effect on demand for sure. But assuming it doesn't in the future because more and more people buy cars outright, um, the serviceability I do think is a genuine question that comes up a lot. Um, like repair costs or how complicated is it to service X, Y, or Z. So if Tesla did get more into that and started advocating more for right to repair, I think that could win over a lot of people. If they started just saying like, okay, we're going to make it really, really easy to work on our vehicles and we're going to upload tutorials on how to service the car yourself and we're going to provide that for third-party shops, and we're going to make parts very accessible and easy to access to the masses. I could see that winning over a lot of people potentially, because a lot of people like to work on cars. And my neighbor, for example, was the one suggesting when he first saw me get my car, he was like, "Why are you buying a Tesla?" And I was like, "Well, I don't like paying for gas. It was the main thing." And he said, "Yeah, but if you need to work on that car, only Tesla can do it. You can't work on them yourself." So, my answer to that was, "Do I look like I work on cars?" No, but a more genuine solution would be, okay, so that guy, he likes the concept of EVs, but he was more hesitant to all the service has to be done by Tesla. So what if Tesla started being more open towards serviceability and right to repair? Maybe that guy would be more interested. Or if there was another EV company outside of Tesla, like an Aptera, that was like, hey, we're going to make all our parts super accessible and At some point, I think Chris Anthony said this, the CEO of Aptera. He said, our goal is to have every part of the Aptera have a little QR code on the inside that you can scan with your phone, and it links you to what the part is, where you can buy it, and a YouTube video of how exactly to service and replace that component. They want it to be incredibly easy to work on, and they want it to be modular and serviceable. And I think that's a really attractive attribute from the business. Um, and the third party market to know that, like, hey, I can buy this car and I'm not stuck with one uh service provider for everything. Right to repair for Tesla won't happen. Yeah, you're probably right. But Jackson Smith was asking, what things can we do to entice more buyers, which I think might be a growing problem. If there's more and more EVs switching to NACS, a lot of people might be more comfortable buying a non-Tesla in the future if they have access to the Supercharger network. I've been saying for years the Supercharger network is Tesla's best advantage. No question. I mean, I don't think most would say Teslas have the best build quality or Tesla has the best customer service, but it's a pretty fundamental thing to get right in a vehicle. Can I drive at places? Can I? It's not even the range. Teslas don't have the best range. What matters the most is, can I drive somewhere and know that there's going to be a charger nearby that I can plug into and get decent charging speeds and then go about my day? That charger network, I think, has sold more Teslas than anything. Sold more Teslas than the software, sold more Teslas than the autopilot has, sold more Teslas than the exterior design. They're definitely not winning on build quality. They haven't won people over on that, but I would rather have a spotty build quality and be on my way on a road trip than have great build quality but be stuck at an Electrify America station, right? Virtual HUD with routing animations for future Model 3s and Ys would be very welcome. Yeah, some people really want those. It's not me. I like the visual simplicity of the Model 3 interior. Honestly, I've been watching, the new refresh Model 3 came out, so I've been watching videos on that. And I get that it's the new model and it's cool and everything, but there's something about that ambient lighting and having more buttons on the steering wheel that is just not, I'm not digging. It's me personally. I'm not saying Tesla should just do what I want, but there's something really simple that I like about the current Model 3 steering wheel, that it's just these two little scroll wheels and that's it. And something that just looks more visually busy on that new steering wheel to have all these buttons. Here's my wiper button, here's my blinker buttons, here's my flashlight button, here's my cruise control button and the scroll wheels. And I'm just like, you have all that, opposed to the gear stocks, which are kind of hidden. They're kind of behind the steering wheel. I actually really love the gear stocks on the old, not the old, the new Roadster. The new Roadster that came out 7 years ago. The 7-year-old new Roadster has those tiny, really hard to see gear paddles on the back, and they don't even have icons on them. I would scratch off the little icons on my gear stocks. I love the simplicity of the interior. It's just so bare bones basic, and just having that one display in the middle. I don't want HUD and numbers and animations up on my truck. But some people really like that. So I say, yeah, I agree with you. Tesla should add that because a lot of people want it. Another one that we're also never going to get, but I think would win a lot of people over, CarPlay. I know a lot of people don't think it's as big a deal, but Apple's talked about this and there's been research groups on this. A lot of people look for CarPlay when they're buying a vehicle because they kind of live off of their phones. Our iPhones are used for a ton of our livelihoods, and making sure that there's a good handshake between your iPhone and your car is kind of important for a lot of people. And after hanging out with Aptera and seeing how the software can be eloquently adapted for a CarPlay interface, I think I think Tesla could do it. I'm not saying it's likely to happen, but I'm not going to say it's impossible. Um, not that it's impossible. What's the word? There's a right way to do it. Aptera has showed us. At least they've showed me. Aptera has basically proven to me that you can build a clean, nice looking user interface that shows you what the car needs to tell you and also shows you the CarPlay user interface. Um, and I think there's a way Tesla could do it. They probably won't, just like Rivian won't, because they're both like, oh, we don't need CarPlay because the car software is good enough. But I don't know. CarPlay is kind of awesome. Thank you, Albert, for the very first, or no, 20th super on a live stream. Wow, they reward you for that. That's cool. Do I think the government should step in for prices for supercharging because it's getting it out of hand? Some people are paying more than gas prices. Mm, Generally speaking, I'm against the government getting involved if possible. Like, I think government should incentivize EV transitions, but I think it should be more on the manufacturer end. Like, I think this whole point of sale rebate, tax credit, whatever you call it, is just too complicated. Like, some EVs qualify, some EVs don't qualify, what yada yada yada. But look at what China's doing. China, I mean, I'm sure they have point of sale credits too, but the main reason BYD has been able to grow so fast and why they're outproducing Tesla in terms of full electric vehicles, it's not hybrids. That's a common misconception now. I keep seeing everybody say, "Oh, BYD only sells more if you factor in hybrids." No, even factoring in just all electric vehicles, BYD sells more than Tesla now. And it's probably because they have a ton of government support. They're getting a ton of financial credits and deductions on their taxes, and they can build things very quickly because the government's just letting them do whatever they need to do to get vehicles on the road. And I think that moves a lot more authentically than the point of sale credit, which is the point of sale credit or the federal tax credit on EVs is basically artificially lowering the price of EVs. You're artificially making them cheaper than they really are. What I want is more genuine, like let's find a way to make them genuinely cheaper, not artificially. How do you make them genuinely cheaper? Well, you kind of do what the government did for BYD. You give them huge tax breaks. You let the you provide huge incentives for any company that's willing to build batteries within the United States. You say, hey, if you want to build a battery plant in the U.S., we're gonna skip a bunch of the red tape. We're going to skip a bunch of the inspections and requirements, and we're going to skip a bunch of the old expenses, or at least we'll waive the fees. The federal government will pay all the fees for all the inspections and code requirements and all that. Obviously, it's a EV factory, so you should make sure that it's built up to code and everything. But the government should waive all those fees rather than expect the manufacturer to pay for all of them. And you should waive a bunch of the corporate tax credits and a bunch of the taxes that they have to pay to get those manufacturing lines up and running. Reward the manufacturer. That way, the actual vehicle can be cheaper rather than reward the point of sale, because then you get these weird tax situations where, Aptera doesn't qualify for the tax credit, even though it's way less strain on the grid, is way more efficient than any EV. But then, a Jeep hybrid that has a 7 kilowatt hour battery pack that gets the same tax credit as a Model Y. It's just silly. There's a bunch of weird things that happen when you get point of sale credits. I do see non-Tesla EVs will see an upsale once NACS are added. Yeah, I think the desirability of non-Teslas will go up a lot with NACS. I'm currently saving money every month to hopefully have 50% down for Model Y one day soon. Hopefully that helps with the interest rates. Yeah, I would assume the interest rates can't go up forever, right? Right? Supercharging slash gas, paying for a service, money has to come from somewhere, and really taxpayers, gas owners shouldn't be paying for it. Supercharging is a service. Um, yeah, there's got to be something you pay for, which is why at the end of the day, I still think vehicles like the Aptera are going to end up being. I don't think Aptera will outsell crossovers or pickup trucks, but I do think it will be a very popular segment. Like, I think the Aptera will be easily the most popular three-wheeler in the world, but also make a substantial dent in the sale of two-door cars or sedans, because a lot of people buying sedans or two-door vehicles are buying them because they're not, packing them full of people. People who want pickup trucks and SUVs are more likely to fill up the bed or, seat more people. But for the daily drivers, like the commuters, the people who just need to move themselves efficiently from point A to point B, um, and don't necessarily need to move around a ton of stuff or a ton of people. Aptera honestly has a decent amount of storage space. I say like it doesn't have much cargo. Aptera has more cubic feet of storage than my Model 3 does. So really the only compromise, in my opinion, with the Aptera is the seating. That's really it. Like, it's still a safe vehicle, super efficient, very affordable, serviceable. So really the only downside is you can't sit more than two people. But I want to ask Aptera about that because they say they want to have this modular center console area. and I want to pitch to them. I want to pitch to them the idea of a bench seat, even if it's a third party, even knowing that it may not be the safest thing in the world. Some people bike places because it's more efficient and more cost effective. Sure, people who ride bikes to work on public roads, they're probably aware it's not the safest form of transportation. Some people ride motorcycles, which is objectively more dangerous than riding in a car. But some people still do it. Like, you let the consumer take that risk. If I want to be a little bit more dangerous in my transportation, let me do that. I'm not saying everybody needs to stuff 3 people in the Aptera, but I've been in bench seats, like my Ford Ranger had a bench seat, and you could fit 3 people in the front row. I think there's a tangible way you could fit 3 people in the Aptera. Sure, I'm willing to admit it's not the safest thing in the world, but let the consumer take that risk if they so desire. If it's a different problem if it's illegal, if like the federal government would ban them from allowing 3 people in the vehicle. But from my conversations with them, I haven't seen that to be true. I didn't see any evidence that I don't see any written law that says autocycles are prohibited from carrying more than 2 people. So I would say if someone's willing to, in a pinch, a lot of the time, I feel like most vehicles are not driving around with more than 2 people. It's just the occasional, oh, you know what, so and so needs a ride to so and so's house, or we just need to throw one extra person in the car. And in a pinch, if you could fit 3 people in the Aptera, sure, it would not be the most comfortable thing in the world. You'd be elbow to elbow. I'm not even saying it would be a something you do on a road trip, but if you just had a center console area that I could fold up like this into a little seat, sure, it's narrow. Sure, it's not going to be comfortable, but there could be a seat belt attached to it, and you just buckle in and drive across town, drop them off. It's not the safest thing in the world, but it would work and not be like against the law. Um, is the Aptera as wide as the Hummer? Yeah, but it's not all width is created equal, is the way I look at it. Like, same thing when you look up Model 3 width, you get the width of the wheels, but then you get the width with the mirrors. So if you look at the width of the Model 3 mirrors when they're extended, when you're driving, it's about 82 inches. The Aptera width is about 87.5 inches. So that means about 5.5 inches wider on each total, which equates to about the Aptera being 2 inches, 2.5 inches wider on each side. So if you're sitting in your Model 3 and you look at the mirrors when they're folded out, like mine are right now, and you just imagine going out an extra 2 inches on each side, that's the width of the Aptera. Yeah, it's kind of wide from the wheels, but that's not the same as being wide from the doors. Hummer is very wide from the doors because, it's such a huge vehicle. And if you factor in the mirrors on the Hummer, it's more like 90 inches, I think, 92 inches or something like that. So it's like, okay, how wide am I versus how, small a tunnel can I fit through versus how small a parking space can I fit in? Um, so a Hummer basically is what I'm trying to say. With the Hummer, you're more likely to open the door and hit the car next to you. The Aptera, the wheels are outward mounted very wide, but the doors are still very narrow. The main like fuselage, the main occupancy area of the Aptera, not the wheel pant area, is actually thinner than a Model 3. And the doors on the Aptera go up, not out. So when you open up the doors of the Aptera, you're not going to have to worry as much about hitting the car next to you, even if the wheels are pretty wide. So yes, it's like, sure, if we just look at width and that's it, you could say, okay, well, the Aptera is going to be a little bit more tight in the parking space. Yeah, getting the car into a smaller parking space might be a bit more tricky than a Model 3, but getting out of the Aptera is going to be far easier than I would say even a Model 3, which is far narrower simply because, I mean, this just happened yesterday. We were getting out of my car and it was in a tight parking space, and you have to like barely open the door all the way because you don't want to hit the car next to you, and then you have to snake out the side. Whereas if it's the Aptera, it's just goes up and it's mounted from a more inward position than the Model 3, which the doors have to stick out a lot. So, um, yes, the Aptera is pretty wide from the wheels, but it's not as many disadvantages as a like a Hummer or a Cybertruck. Cybertruck's very wide, and the doors have to stretch out. Um, so it's a cool vehicle. I could talk about the Aptera all day, and I probably will this week. I've got several Aptera videos in the works, and I'm asking the channel members to vote on which ones I should make next. So it's my favorite company, my favorite product. I don't care if it makes it to market or not. There's still a lot to be learned. There's still a lot to educate yourself on in regards to um, efficiency and capital raising and manufacturing. There's a ton of things to learn about the Aptera, and I've just accepted. I'm going to be upset if it doesn't make it to market, regardless. Um, and if it doesn't make it, then I hope another company makes something close to it. So that's why I want Aptera to have as much hype or as much excitement as possible, because if Aptera doesn't make it, then I want another company to try their best to emulate the product if they can. Um, I would love for Tesla to try to go head to head with Aptera. That would be great. Oh my God, my neighbor has ducks now. Jeez. I thought they just had chickens. There are just ducks walking around my neighbor's yard. That is hilarious. What's the internal width of the Aptera? Seems very narrow but uncomfortable for the seating. I can tell you from experience, I sat in the Gamma prototype, so the production model will be any better. The interior of the Aptera is great. It's incredibly comfortable. I don't know how they designed those seats, but they feel fantastic. Um, I've sat in both seating positions. Honestly, the bizarre thing about the Aptera, I think it's because it's a two-seater, it has way more legroom. Like my knees are kind of up here in the Model 3. In the Aptera, I could fully extend my legs. Like my legs could, my feet could barely hit the end. And I asked him, I said, "Is this just really good legroom because it's a prototype?" And Jason Hill said, "No, the chief of design." He said, "Actually, the production model has even better legroom than the prototype." And I was like, "What the heck?" It's probably because you don't have to move the seat forward to make room. The Model 3 is very spatially efficient, but if you're in the second row, you don't have a ton of leg room if someone in the front wants to have a ton of leg room. So you kind of have to compete with each other. So normally I unlock a lot of leg room in my Model 3 because no one's sitting behind me. But if someone is sitting behind me, I have to move it up a bit to make room for them. And the Aptera is just one row. So you can leave the seat back as far as you want, and you just have all this incredible leg room. Um, Mike can confirm as well. Aptera Gamma prototype was weirdly spacious. It's bizarre how much space they can fit. I don't know the exact dimensions of the internal fuselage, but I'm actually working on a video about the aerodynamics and efficiency of the Aptera, kind of verifying their claims. And you can see it in side by sides. The pictures are on my phone, which is my camera right now, but you'll see in that video. Do I think the $2,000 investment incentive will remain active after the last 185 of 2000 launch edition Aptera have been fulfilled? Probably. Aptera is still funding dependent, which is why they're so focused on getting investors and trying to incentivize people to invest in them. I can't blame them. They need the money, and I want them to have the money, so I can't fault them for it. My only suggestion to Aptera would be that they should start offering price lock, especially if you're going to start offering things like, the latest incentive package was if you invest $2,000 in Aptera, you get $1,000 off the vehicle. And I was kind of like, okay, that's fine, but if you're getting $1,000 off the vehicle, people should know what the vehicle costs, because some people might be investing with the expectation that it's a $32,000 vehicle and they get $1,000 off, so now it's a $31,000 vehicle. But if it turns out, which it sounds like it is, the price is probably going to be a bit more than they originally expected, just like the Cybertruck. Probably not to the same extreme of the Cybertruck. Aptera Launch Edition, I think, from what we've heard in interviews, is more likely to cost around $38,000. So if you tell people that it's actually 38,000 and we'll knock $1,000 off, so you're actually paying $37,000. Yeah, that might tick off a lot of people. That might confuse it. They're like, "Wait, I thought I was getting a discount. Now you're price gouging." So I just don't want to tick people off, which is why I think, at least for the early production ramp, in the grand scheme of things, the first 2,000 or the first 10,000 deliveries are not going to be that much compared to, if you're planning on building 20,000 a year, 40,000 a year, which is their eventual target. That's kind of what their production capacity is aiming for. Like that's what their factory is rated for. How much space they have is 20,000 vehicles a year with one shift and 40,000 vehicles a year with two shifts, like a night shift. Um, I would say, yeah, you might not have the best margins on the launch edition, but I think they should just lock in the pricing. Just pick one. It can be higher than what the website says. Whatever. Just say it's 35. That's a sweet spot. That was the original promise price for the Model 3. And the entry Model 3 goes, 270 miles of range. The launch edition Aptera goes 400 and has all-wheel drive, solar charging. It's faster than the Model 3. I'm getting so annoyed of the argument. Well, if there's a cheap Tesla, no one will buy the Aptera. It's like there's so many differences between the two, and there's still a bunch of people buying gas cars that are more expensive than Model 3s. It's like it comes down to features. Some people want different features that the Aptera offers. Some people want Tesla features. Yeah, if you want a Tesla, buy a Tesla, but that doesn't change the fact that a lot of people still want an Aptera that's, a $35,000 vehicle that can go 400 miles and can charge itself, so you don't have to plug it into your garage. You don't have to rely on DC fast charging. Um, so I would just say 35 grand, that's the launch edition price. And if you invest $2,000 or more, your price is locked. I think that would incentivize a lot of people to invest, which Aptera is looking for. They need funding, and they're in the process right now, I believe, of, well, okay, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to stop talking. Uh Aptera is still seeking investment, that's all I'll say. And of course, they're looking through government loans, government credits, crowdfunding from their fans and from whale investors. They're pursuing all of those avenues. And I think if you're offering someone $1,000 off on the vehicle, they should know what it costs. So I would just say if you don't invest more than $2,000, your price is subject to change. But if you invest $2,000 or more, your price on the launch edition is guaranteed to be 35,000. That's it. And sure, the margins might not be great because I know every time we ask Aptera about locking in a price, they say, well, a lot of our supply agreements with our suppliers are subject to change, and they're changing all the time because lithium price changes, and although that's going down, so the battery pack should be getting cheaper to build than it was a few years ago. But there's other things like the powertrain and the CPC parts, I'm sure, aren't cheap because the Aptera has like a carbon fiber body. That's got to be kind of pricey, but they don't have a paint shop to worry about, so that helps compensate for it. So there's aspects of the business that are fluctuating in price all the time, which is likely why they're hesitant to agree to a price. But I I would just say like, okay, you might not have the best margins right away, but I would say just accept that if someone's willing to invest a ton of money in you. If someone's giving you a bunch of money up front, then like that kind of offsets the weaker margins, right? You're losing margins on the product, but you're gaining an investor who is, if they believe in the future of the company and they want to buy the product, they're probably not going to sell their stock, right? At least not quickly. So, do you think there's a difference between uh, promoting Aptera on YouTube versus defending them from haters on X? Just call it Twitter. Most people are stuck in their ways, so why bother trying to convince them? Similar to EV haters, it'll mean faster delivery of Aptera for those who want them to say, want them, like you say about Teslas. Well, I enjoy the debate. I think it's fun to debate people that you disagree with. Um, if someone is open-minded and they can admit that they're wrong, or the problem I see with a lot of Aptera hate is it's just being based on wrong information, which I would like to say, especially on Twitter, like if someone goes out tweeting inaccurate info about Aptera, I would like them to be corrected. And a lot of people just flat out don't bother correcting them, and that just kind of reinforces a lot of people's opinion. The reason I guess I'm more defensive of Aptera is because I feel like a lot of the criticism Aptera gets is kind of identical to the criticism Tesla got in the early days. And now there's all these Tesla people that, without realizing it, are acting the exact same way Tesla deniers were. And they act like, oh, well, Tesla's the underdog. I'm on Tesla's side. But then they turn around and do the exact same thing that Tesla deniers were doing. Um, I've seen people say that. It's like, so you think Aptera will fail for all the same reasons Tesla will fail. And Tesla turned out to be a great success. And I think Aptera could too. It's not a guarantee, but nothing is, right? I mean, it's all startups, it's all new things. I mean, Tesla is very, very unlikely to fail now because they've gotten so big and their margins are so good and whatever. But a lot of people, I think, are acting like they jumped on the Tesla train, and they've been on the Tesla train since the beginning, and they fought all the deniers. And I'm a Tesla fan because I believed in them and I supported them and I did the math and I did all my research correctly and I knew they would be a success. And reality is, it's like, okay, you could do all that same research on Aptera and probably come to a similar conclusion, but you're just not listening. You're just not paying attention to any of the things they're doing. And a lot of them are only on board with Tesla because you only believed them once they were profitable. You didn't believe in them before they were profitable. You didn't want to talk about them that much. You weren't buying the product. You weren't buying the stock until after they had proven themselves. Um, as in, you don't, you didn't research the company that thoroughly. You just waited until the profits started coming in. Um, Whereas I think a lot of investment growth or a lot of success can be foreseen or planned beforehand if you just look at like, okay, what's the business model? How are they structuring the company? That kind of thing. I have an Aptera ordered with the largest battery and off-road pack, better adventure vehicle than Rivian because of solar. I think that trim will get canceled. Um, there's a chance, but it doesn't sound that complicated is kind of the interesting thing about it. I mean, I'm with you. I didn't buy the off-road package, but um, I did order the 1,000 mile range Aptera, the largest battery pack. And it sounds like, to keep things simple, they're using these 21120 cells, which are the same diameter on the top as the 2170s. They're just taller, which allows them to reuse and recycle a bunch of the battery connectors, and um, a lot of the battery pack design can be reused, and they just put in taller cells. Um, I guess they do have to beef up the suspension a little bit because it will be a bit heavier. But because so much of it stays the same and a lot of the cell characteristics are the same as the launch edition battery pack, I feel like um, it shouldn't be that hard to diversify the product lineup. Um, Dude, totally would have bought Aptera if they were available. I know a ton of people have told me that, actually. A ton of, I would say, more friends in my personal life have told me they would buy an Aptera um, that don't have a Tesla, that are not an EV owner, have told me they would buy one if it was out. Then I've talked to of people that are interested in buying a Tesla. Genuinely. I know a lot of people that are on the boat of like, yeah, Teslas are cool, but I just can't afford it. But I've talked to people that are saying like, yeah, if Aptera makes it, I'm totally buying that um, before I would buy a Tesla. I, it depends on the service needed. As I consider a Model Y purchase, would Tesla service come to me since I live 4 hours away? Yeah, yeah, that does depend on a lot of things. I would ask Tesla that question because obviously you shouldn't post where you live in the chat, but Tesla should probably be able to answer you. I just got my used Model Y yesterday and it's amazing. Came with FSD included for $40,000. Wow, congrats, Jacob. That sounds great. That's a good deal. I hope it works well for you. Nice. And also, I haven't talked about this, but thank you everybody who's been using the referral code. I was very, very impressed with how quickly the referral credits came kind of dogpiling in. I think it was mainly motivated by the point of sale credit. So thank you, federal government. But yeah, I got, I think, like 7 referrals over the course of like 3 or 4 days. Let me see. My first one was, maybe that was you, Jacob. I don't know. My first one was on January 11th for the year. And then January 15th was my last one. No, that was referral. 13th was my last. So that's 3 days, and there was one, two, three, four, five, six referrals. Geez, 6 referrals over the course of 3 days. That's nuts. So thank you, by the way, if you guys are listening. That's incredible, and I know there's a lot of different codes you guys could use, so I appreciate it. And all the people for using the Aptera. There's even more of you that have used my Aptera referral code. Thank you so much. Um, What's up with the Cybertruck not charging with the CCS adapter software lock? Well, it's not even that. It's just it doesn't physically fit. They probably didn't prioritize CCS compatibility with the Cybertruck because they knew CCS was on the way out. Within a year, no EVs will be made with CCS, basically, or very little. So they were like, why optimize for it if we don't need it? they know the future is NACS. So Cybertruck, majority of the Cybertruck's life will be in a future where NACS is the only port. So sure, that in the short term means it's not that compatible with CCS stations. I think they were willing to take the loss on that because it's going to be far more complicated to re-engineer the charging port to be able to fit CCS because they couldn't fit it in the little fender. So they would have to cut out steel into the panel and have a different mechanism just for CCS, which I think they made the right call with that. There's a lot of things I disagree that Tesla does, but only optimizing it for the NACS port I say is fine. That's no problem. Um, my wife would never let me sell the Model Y for an Aptera, but my ideal vehicle configuration otherwise would be the Aptera and Cybertruck. Yeah, I don't think the Aptera will be very wife friendly for a lot of ladies, just because they don't like how weird it looks, or I don't know. A lot of wives tend to prefer a hatchback or more storage space. I don't know. It's just a. I'm not trying to make a generalization. I'm just saying something I notice in my personal life. They tend to like the higher sitting cars. There's a stereotype that's probably somewhat based in reality with the whole soccer mom concept of like the mom that wants the bigger car to fit all the kids and all the stuff in, and the guy tends to like the more sporty, smaller, sleeker car. And in many ways, the Aptera is more sporty. You know, it's a faster 0 to 60 time than the Model 3 for the money. Sure, you can get a Model 3 Performance, but that's going to cost a lot more than an Aptera. Um, unless you buy it used or whatever. Um, yeah, but it's not a Mustang. Yeah, that's true. Um, the main reason I keep dwelling on Aptera and the main reason I think it's not talked about enough is I keep trying to imagine ourselves like, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, looking back at EV startups, looking back at which companies made it and which ones didn't. I think right now people are very thinking in the short term. And when we're analyzing these startup companies, I'm not talking about Tesla. Tesla's not a startup to me. They're just an existing automaker. I don't look at them as legacy auto. Legacy auto to me means they've been around for more than 40 years, or 50 years. And startup means that like they're not profitable to me. If you're like profitably delivering vehicles, I would say you're no longer a startup. But Tesla's at a profit, and we're looking at Rivian or Lucid or Canoe or Fisker or whatever you want to look at. And I think that everybody puts way too much of a crown, way too much of achievement on the concept of getting into production and starting deliveries. Everyone just assumes that if you start production and start deliveries, now you're a real company. Now you exist. You have succeeded. You are a success story. And I think what I've learned from watching these startups, whether it be Lucid or Lordstown specifically, is a great example. Just because you start production and just because you start deliveries, that does not mean you are a success. Or the first Fisker. There's actually been two Fisker startups. Fisker Ocean is a new startup. The Fisker Karma went under. But they started production and they started deliveries. And a lot of people just act like, oh, well, because the vehicle's in production and because they started deliveries, therefore the company's a success. And what we've seen from especially companies like Lucid and Lordstown, the L's, they take the L. You can get a car into production. That does not mean your company is going to make it. If you can't build a vehicle profitably, and you cannot or you cannot find buyers for your product because it's not that great, it doesn't matter if you started production or started deliveries. You're still going to go under. And I think the companies that are going to survive are the ones with the clearest, quickest path towards profitability. Um, and it's kind of a question of like how much money can they burn. That's really all these, especially electric vehicle startup companies. It's a question of like how much cash do you have in the bank and how quickly can you turn a profit. And we're seeing lots of different startups have different approaches towards profitability. Rivian, and I was talking to my friend Mike, who has the R1S, I think he was in the chat earlier. He was talking about solid state batteries by 2030. I don't know if he's serious or making a meme, because some people make a meme about the Toyota solid state batteries things. I've just heard so much promise with solid state. But anyway, we were talking about this recently. I was like, Rivian is kind of modeling the Tesla approach, but I think they're doing it in a lot more dangerous way. The Tesla approach was sell and establish a brand with expensive vehicles like the R1T and R1S, and make a buttload of them and establish a brand that people are aware of and excited for. But as we've all seen, Rivian is not profitable. They are nowhere close to profitable, honestly. Even not factoring in their growth costs, if you don't factor in the Georgia plant and the R2 ramp up costs, even not factoring that in, and just looking at their cost of goods, like the cost to build an R1T and R1S, they're losing like $30,000 a vehicle. That's a lot better than it used to be. They used to be losing like $100,000 per vehicle, and they've made improvements by scale and increasing production capacity. So yeah, they've gotten it down to a negative 30,000 per vehicle, but that's still a long ways from breaking even. And they can't just break even. They have to sell those, to have a company that can succeed, you need to sell at a profit. So basically, the way Rivian has structured their business is they will never be profitable selling the R1T and R1S, which are amazing vehicles, by the way. I love those. I love that. I was just checking out my friend's R1S the other day. It's holding up great. It still looks fantastic. I love the seats, and the interior is just so beautiful, and the turning radius is fantastic. The acceleration is second to none. Like, the off-roading capability of the R1S is incredible, and there's so many people buying it, and I don't blame them. The R1S, I think I saw, was one of, if not the most popular vehicle sold in Colorado, which I was in Colorado last month. It makes sense. I saw a lot of R1Ss. They were all over the place. I love those Rivians, but they are not a profitable vehicle. It's $150,000 car that they're selling for 80,000, 90,000. And Rivian's plan is to eventually turn a profit with the R2. They're betting the whole company on that R2 platform. And the main reason I'm not, I want Rivian to succeed. I think they will succeed, but I do think it's going to be close. It's this free dive maneuver that the company goes through. You're burning cash, you're running out of money, you're not running at a profit, and you're trying to build a brand and build up production. And in order for that business model to work, which is what Tesla did, sell Roadster, sell Model S, Model X. Tesla didn't turn a profit until Model 3 started hitting its stride. But at first, when Model 3 first started ramping up, that was their weakest point. That's when you're at your most dangerous point of existence. It's like a free dive, right? It's like a plane going straight towards the ground, and the goal is that you're going to pick up enough speed from that fall that you will be able to propel yourself when you turn at the last second. So it's a question of how quickly can you pull up on the yoke of the plane? How quickly can you uh, maneuver yourself towards a point where you can actually make a profit? But that's also a risk of, like, can your plane survive that maneuver, or are you going to move too slowly to the point that you just crash and hit the ground? That's going to be the most sketchy point in Rivian's history, and that's the reason I have not bought Rivian stock, is because I do not think this is their hardest moment. Their hardest moment is when they're going to be deep in the initial R2 ramp up phase. When they're thick in the middle of production hell of the R2, their spending has got to go way, way up, and their spending is already high. They're expanding the adventure network, and they're building the R1T and R1S, losing $30,000 a pop. It is not going to be an easy maneuver for them. And if you look at Tesla, when they were in their Model S and X ramp up phase and Model 3 ramp up phase, they were not burning as much money as Rivian is. Tesla has always been the penny pincher. Tesla has always been the cost cutter. Rivian is living very luxuriously right now. It's just like, oh yeah, let's do the max pack. Oh yeah, we have all these paint options. Plus, Rivian is not doing just Model S and X. They're doing R1T, R1S, and the delivery van. Delivery van honestly has the best margins, so that's kind of what me and Mike were talking about. The delivery van honestly might have the best chance of keeping that company afloat because it's not too fancy, it's not too complicated, and the margins on it are fairly good. And there's a lot of demand for the delivery van, and they can sell it for a pretty high price. And it's only got one motor, it's front wheel drive, it uses lithium iron phosphate batteries, which are cheaper. That's the trickier thing. R1T and R1S require huge battery packs, and those are going to be so much more expensive, so much harder to turn profitable than Tesla did with the Model S and X, which only required, most of them were 75, 80 kilowatt hour battery packs. There were some that were 100, but Rivian and uh, R1T, R1S, those are bare minimum 135 kilowatt hours. And then if you go with the max pack, it's like 150 kilowatt hours or something. It's even more. Very expensive vehicles, very cool vehicles, but my biggest fear with this whole free dive maneuver where you have to pull up at the last second to turn a profit that Rivian is pulling is that teaser image of the R2 that we've seen, where it's kind of still R1S looking. It's kind of a boxy design, and boxy design is great, if you're doing your tight wheelbase with your off-roading capability and you want it to sit a lot of people. I think the R2 will be cool, and they said they're going to unveil it here in early 2024, which is now. So we should see the R2 any month now. And don't get me wrong, I'm super pumped for it. I'm excited to see it. I want to see it. I want to talk about it, especially a Rivian with NACS, I think is going to sell like gangbusters. But the problem with that boxy design, that off-roading emphasis, it does not scream efficiency. And when you don't scream efficiency with your design, it means big battery to get meaningful range. Or what I would propose to Rivian, and we can talk about this more, Mike, when you get here. He's serious about solid state batteries. Okay, we need to talk more about that. Um, my concern is you need a big battery pack, which usually means not great margins or high price. Everyone's kind of expecting for the R2 platform to be in the $40,000 range or less would be even more ideal. But if you have a boxy design, and everybody's going to expect the R2 to have meaningful range, everybody's going to want, 300 plus mile range. That's kind of the sweet spot in the EV market if you want it to be popular. And I personally think I would rather them go lower range with a smaller battery, even if that doesn't look as good in the press. I would try to double down on you don't need high range, you need low price with the R2. We've kind of seen what happens when you want boxy off-road design that has high range. It means you need 100 plus kilowatt hours in the pack, and that's not going to be profitable. If the goal of the R2 is to be profitable, they're going to really need to penny pinch. And Tesla was able to penny pinch pretty effectively with the Model 3 because it's not that fancy. It's aerodynamic, but it's kind of a basic turning radius. There's not a ton of storage. I mean, it's fine. It's a good car. I love my car, but there's not a ton of bells and whistles. At least the original Model 3, there was no powered trunk. There was no ventilated seats. There was no driver display. They just kept it very simple, bare bones. Um, they just keep it really easy so that the main path was we don't need it to be fancy. We just need a reliable EV that can charge fast and go a meaningful distance and doesn't cost that much. And I'm worried that Rivian has too much of this adventure focus, which I understand that's like their whole company ethos. And I love that the vibe they've captured with the R1T and R1S. Like they welcome that adventure and they're just so likable, and RJ just seems like the coolest guy. Everybody likes him. He's Clark Kent, you know. he's just he's Superman, and he's just like, I would so much rather talk to RJ than Elon at this point. I love what they're going for, but I just know how complicated it is to ramp up production. And when I'm thinking back, thank you, CJ. Welcome to the channel members perks. I gotta add your name to the credits now. Appreciate the support. So I'm just curious how the R2 is going to be profitable if it still has that kind of boxy off-roading design, and the battery pack in it has got to be pretty big, which means it's going to be hard to sell for cheap. Um, yeah, and when we're looking back at which EV companies were able to pull off that maneuver where you burn a lot of cash and then at the last second you pull up, you're able to get profitable. I still personally think, as well, we were talking earlier, the reason I kind of got on the subject is like, well, the superchargers are about the same price as gasoline. My whole point there is that EVs that prioritize efficiency, the more time that goes by, are going to have more and more cost advantages. And what I keep coming back to is um, EVs that are more efficient are going to cost less to own, and they're going to require smaller battery packs. So fundamentally, cost is the main prohibitor with electrification. I don't think it's misinformation, although that is a big part of it. I think that has more to do with confirmation bias than it does, the media. And the best way we're going to convince those people who have misinformation stuffed in their brain about EVs is to surround them with people that switch to EVs and live happily and comfortably with them. And the best way to get more people on board is affordability. Best way to achieve affordability is efficiency. So I keep coming back to this: efficiency first will be the long-term reward. It's kind of like, people looking for shortcuts in, losing weight or something. I'm losing weight right now, so that's why it's on my mind. But it's like you can try to take those online. I see ads for them on Twitter all the time. You see ads for those like, oh, lose weight fast. You just take these pills or you take these shots and it tricks your body into burning more fat. Yeah, those are all shortcuts. And they're typically not going to result in as good a gain as people who just focus on like exercise, eating less, or eating healthier, preferably both. Um, so I kind of look at that like running your business efficiently and looking for ways to cut cost sets the right company ethos, sets the right company habits to succeed in the long run. And I could be wrong. Again, I'm young and I'm stupid. There's a bunch of things I haven't seen before, and there's a chance Aptera doesn't make it. But I think the main reason, if they don't make it, it's going to be because they couldn't find the right investor. I don't think it's because the company business model was flawed. I mean, I guess you could argue that the business model is flawed if it can't attract the right investors, but I'm gonna blame, at this point, knowing what I know about the company and knowing what I know about the product and the profitability of the brand. If Aptera doesn't make it, I'm not gonna blame Aptera. I'm gonna blame the investment community for not like the individuals, like they didn't do enough crowdfunding. They've honestly exceeded all of their crowdfunding goals. The crowdfunding has offset the weak funding from whale investors and, big venture capitalist groups that are pouring billions and billions of dollars into Lucid for no reason and not pouring it into Aptera. That's who I'm more upset by, not so much the individual. Um, but I think the Aptera, if you I should reshare these videos. Aptera Owners Club has posted some of the Steve and Chris, the CEOs of Aptera, went to um, Saudi Arabia, and they were doing this investment round with a lot of big capitalist groups. And they have this presentation where they showcase their path towards profitability and how it is faster than Rivian, it is faster than Lucid. Basically, their point of here's when production starts, here's where we turn a profit is faster than anybody else's, and it's mainly due to the efficiency focus of the company. No paint shop, um, a lot less legal paperwork to get an auto cycle on the market compared to a four-wheel vehicle using smaller battery packs. I I just think I have the feeling that's going to pay off. If we go into the future and look back, which EV companies make it, which ones didn't, I would say it's the ones that were managing the business and building the product inefficiently. And the most expensive component in the EV primarily is the battery pack. So the company that is able to build their battery pack the most efficiently and the cheapest. I mean, just look around at the startup space. Lucid started out with a 120 kilowatt hour battery pack. Rivian started out with a 130 kilowatt hour battery pack. And they'll maybe next year, or later this year, sorry, get down into 100 kilowatt hours per car. And Lucid with the Air Pure is getting down into the 90 kilowatt hour, 80 kilowatt hour pack. Meanwhile, Aptera, their launch edition is less than 50 kilowatt hours. Okay. Everything else might be somewhat trivial if we're talking about battery packs and management systems. And there's trickle down efficiency that comes along with that. Smaller battery pack means that the battery management system doesn't have to work as hard because there's less space to cool. Excuse me. Skipping the paint shop saves a ton of money. having less color options, and the fact that unlike Lucid, unlike Rivian, unlike, well, I don't know about Canoo, but Canoo's just specializing in delivery fleet vehicles. The Aptera at least focused on, we're just, for our launch edition, there's just one trim. Rivian has so many different colors and trims and wheels and tire packages, and now they got dual motor packages and quad motor packages, and Lucid's got, oh my God, Lucid, they can't stop. They've got way too many paint color options. They've got tri-motor, dual motor. They're just now doing rear-wheel drive, Dream Drive Pro, and I think Dream Drive even leaves out certain hardware, and they're putting LiDAR and all these cameras and crap in it. Aptera is just like every single launch edition has this color, this powertrain, this solar package, this interior. It's literally like, as far as the launch edition goes, which I believe on their last investor webinar or their last reservation Q&A. I forget what it's called. They did an update interview where everybody asked them questions and they answered them. Um, I believe Chris said they have over 10,000 people now that have switched to the launch edition. So over 10,000 people that have put down paid reservations that are all in agreement of the exact exterior, interior, powertrain, and battery pack. That saves so much time in complexity just by keeping it so dang simple. I haven't seen anybody do that. I've not seen a single other startup company except maybe Canoo. I mean, the only vehicles they've delivered are those vans, so I don't think there's that many color options. But Canoo, I'm still perplexed how they're still alive, but I'm for it. I'm a shareholder, by the way, which you know what that means. You know I'm not making money on Canoo, but I'm still a shareholder. I'm holding on. And I want them to succeed, but if anything, Canoo has taught me that it's a lot harder to kill these companies than people think. A lot of people have this mentality of like, oh, well, Aptera is funding dependent, so that means they're going to die any day. It's like, we've been saying Canoo's going to die any day for over a year now, and they're still here, and they're still delivering vehicles, and they're still hiring people, and they're still, but it's like, you can run a company on life support for a shocking amount of time, and that's partially why I don't think Rivian's doomed. I think Rivian will make it, but I do think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. I think their business model is going to be very similar to Tesla's, where you burn money, and then during that initial ramp up phase, it looks horrible. You basically bet the whole company. You spend every last dollar you have on the ramp up, expecting that there will be enough demand for Tesla. It was the Model 3. For Rivian, it's going to be the Model 2. You spend every last dollar you have, and then at the last second, it's kind of like, well, the first example I provided was like it's a plane in free fall, and then at the last second it has to pull up to lift itself further. Or it's kind of like holding your breath when you swim underwater and trying to get like through a tunnel, knowing that there's air on the other side. But you got to swim like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. You got to swim through this really long chasm that's kind of dark and scary, and you're not sure if there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel, and you got to hold your breath, and Rivian's going to hold their breath for a long time to get to profitability with the R2. But the good news is Rivian does have a lot of cash in the bank, and that means they can afford. Rivian's got big lungs to hold a lot of cash, and that they'll probably make it. I don't think they're going to bankrupt themselves, but I do think that in terms of an investment, I think the stock will probably be at its absolute lowest during that point, because they're going to look like they're about to go bankrupt. It's going to look really, really bad for a couple of quarters. And that's maybe when I'd consider buying. I would consider buying at their lowest of the low. And so far, it seems like every quarter they just get lower, because obviously Rivian's in a lot of uh, cash burn phase. So what are they at right now? $17. Yeah, they're down 86% in the past, since they IPO'd. And I think they'll probably get down into the like under, 90% from their IPO. But in the long run, I think they'll make it. Anyway, a Rivian acquisition would be value negative for Tesla. Yeah, I don't think anyone would buy them. They're kind of expensive too. They're currently $17 billion. Not a lot of companies have that kind of cash right now. You think Chris should take that Prince Mohammed bin Salman money? I believe they were talking with him, but everything I heard from Steve and Chris was more just, um, this is public, I can say this. They said that everyone they talked to was inspired and encouraged by the Aptera mission and their business model. But the answer they kept getting is we're not deploying capital right now. They were just told that interest rates too high, it's too risky, it's just a bad time to invest. And at least according to what I believe they've said publicly, they said that's changing. They said in 2024 there's a lot more venture capitalists that are open to investing now. So I'm hoping for good news here. I feel like every video I watch from you makes the Aptera appeal more and more to me and makes me want it more. Well, I'm not paid by them for the record, but I'm enjoying I'm enjoying the research on companies, and if they don't make it or they do make it, I think there will be a lot to learn. I think there will be a lot of evidence to suggest that there is demand for a vehicle like this, and there's a lot of advantages to a vehicle designed like this. TFLV, they just launched a Model 3 Sub-Zero range test. Here we go. Well, I hope they compare it with a gas car. I feel like that doesn't get talked about enough. Everyone just assumes EV range is this huge thing, and it's like gas cars get worse range in the winter too. Look at the range differences between them. Um, you see Kia's modular van platform. I think I found my new camper van platform. Yeah, that was interesting. I looked at that. I mean, it's kind of interesting. It'll probably have a better chance at six surviving than Canoe, but I bet Canoe feels very offended because there was a while there that Hyundai and Kia were in talks to buy Canoe, and then they didn't, and then Kia now has unveiled this thing that looks a lot like the Canoe, but yeah. Do I think we will see the Tesla Model C/2 revealed this year? What is Model C? Where do you guys get these names? I know. I wish Tesla would give us a name. I certainly hope so. I think they should um unveil it when production is basically ready. I think the main reason we haven't seen it yet is the demand for Model 3 and Y, I think, will drop like a rock if Tesla unveils a $25,000 car, which is why, if they're smart, they should unveil it basically weeks before deliveries begin, because you're going to cause a huge Osborne effect. If Tesla unveiled the Model 2 tomorrow, but they said, well, we can't build this until, next year, deliveries start end of 2025. You know how many people are going to hold off on buying a Tesla if they know that there's a cheaper one coming out next year? Especially if it's cool in some way, if it's some radical futuristic design that has no paint or something. So many, oh man, I would be interested in that, honestly. Tesla could talk me out of the Aptera theoretically. if they went to if they went to head to head with them and they just started competing with them, I'd feel very bad for Aptera and I would hope they would succeed, but I just think the market segment is there and Aptera is proving that. Um, but yeah, there might still be some advantages. Tesla probably wouldn't put solar on it, and Tesla probably wouldn't do the high range model. I take that back. I would still want the high range Aptera. Tesla, if they do a compact, small vehicle that's even got a tighter wheelbase or like less wheels or something, if they do just a 2-seater or 3-seater, that kind of thing, um, they would likely just have a one size fits all. They would just have one battery pack for it, one powertrain for it, and it probably wouldn't be solar. And the Aptera would still have higher range options and um, more of a right to repair emphasis. And now I've gotten really involved. I'm very interested in the Aptera software as well. So um, I'd be very interested in it though, because basically I always feel like the cheapest Tesla is the best Tesla. So I'm very curious in Tesla making a cheaper option. But they are probably well aware that if they unveiled one now, you would heavily impact today's demand. So if they're smart, it sounds like they're working on the assembly line at Giga Texas, at least according to Elon. So if they start building them, I think they should unveil them right before delivery. Like, I think I did a video on this, but I want to reiterate. Um, I think you could take non-refundable deposits for the Tesla compact car or whatever they end up calling it, the Model 2. Um, you could probably take $1,000 non-refundable deposits for it without showing anything. Reveal nothing. You don't show it. You don't talk about the range. I mean, you can deduct from previous reports that it'll be LFP, it'll use the no rare earth material powertrain. There's all kinds of stuff they've told. If you go back and watch Tesla Investor Day, which was kind of a big waste of time. But Tesla Investor Day is basically a huge presentation talking about the the cheaper car, the Tesla Compact, without showing the Tesla Compact or giving us the range. It's all about the in-house design controllers and the 48-volt architecture that allows for thinner wiring. So they're going to take everything they learned about the Cybertruck and apply it to a super cheap, super affordable vehicle. Apply all of that stuff, and you'll know that the Tesla Compact will be, maybe the Foundation series Compact will be 35,000 and not 25,000. But I bet you the demand in the Tesla brand power is so strong, so high, they could probably take non-refundable deposits with no unveiling, no event, no range, no price, and then say, okay, come to the delivery event and we'll unveil the compact at the delivery event. And then everybody that put down the $1,000 non-refundable deposit can choose to take delivery there, or they can finance it there, figure out the money at the event. Um, and if you don't like that it's $35,000, then I guess you don't have to buy the car. But the demand for that car is going to be insane just because Teslas carry a certain amount of brand power. There's a bunch of people that just buy new Teslas even though they own Teslas. I know people who have sorry. I know people that have purchased five, six, seven different Teslas. They just like upgrading all the time, and a lot of people just want the latest cutting edge tech. And yeah, I want them to unveil it, but I also think it would make business sense for them not to unveil it until right before deliveries begin. Um, let's see. I'm going to Yellowstone next month. Model Y car camping will be an interesting winter adventure for sure. Good luck. I might be doing that in the near future as well. We're looking at like mattresses to get for the back. Just to reiterate, the Model 3 currently doesn't work with the referral program. I just tried your referral link and it works with everything but the Model 3, even in inventory. Yeah, I had a feeling that would happen. It happened as soon as they refreshed the Model 3. They took it off the referral program, which I'm guessing is because they believe the demand is too high, so they don't want to incentivize people to try to sell it because it's this big refresh with all these new changes. So they probably feel like let's not, because referral credits cost them money. You know, if I use referral credits, it's costing them something. So they don't see the point. It's the same reason the Cybertruck doesn't qualify. Demand is very high for the Cybertruck, so it's not on the referral program. Any vehicle that they want more demand for, they'll put on the referral program. Right now, they don't need more demand for the Model 3, although the backlog I don't think has shot back as much as they thought. The prices aren't going up for the Model 3, which is usually a sign that demand is very high. So my guess is they will add it back to the referral program in the not too distant future. So if you really care about using my referral code or getting a referral code on the Model 3, I would just say wait, because I think there's a decent chance. They just added back the Model 3 to the referral program in Europe, and Europe got the Model 3 refresh in October. Now it's January and it's back. So I bet maybe February, March, they'll probably put the Model 3 back. Um, Thoughts on Marquez selling his Tesla for the Porsche 911 as someone as techie as him leaving an electric car and going back to gasoline? I was very confused by it. I watched his video on it, and I think he's just a performance guy at the end of the day. He cares about sports cars and driving fast, and I'm just not that. It just makes no sense to me, I guess because I'm an efficiency guy. Also, the other thing I want to remind people is Marquez reviews cars for a living. He has this whole autofocus channel, and he has this special partnership with, what's their name? Cars and Driver, Autoblock. I don't know. There's a partnership he has with a major automotive journalist company that is not just an EV company. They do gas too. And he reviews a new car, it feels like every 2 weeks. So I questioned the necessity or the purpose of his daily driver, because if he has to review a new car every 2 weeks, how often does he really get to drive his daily driver? And he still owns a Rivian, so I don't know how often it's using that. But I did not find his argument very compelling. I found it hilarious, though. I was arguing with people on Twitter about how they said, see, gas cars are still better because Marquez bought a 911. And I was like, most of the video is him actually complaining about it. which made me laugh. He just kept saying, "This car is so good. It's great. It's not a 10 out of 10 on anything, but it's so good. I've watched so many videos on how good it is. It's great. I love this car. It's a 9 out of 10 on everything. It's so good. It's so great." And then he gets in the car and complains about how, okay, the tech is not that great. There's not a lot of storage space. And this is kind of annoying. And I don't like this part about it. And this part's kind of annoying. But it's great. And I love it. I was like, all I could really gather was it handles really nice, which to performance people, I suppose, is very important. But I have no idea why. Maybe because I drive cars differently than they do, but handling to me just means it turns really nicely. But most driving isn't turning. I guess if you go into a canyon and you floor it in the turns, I guess that's more fun. But I guess for me, that's not most of driving. Most of driving is on longer straight roads. And even when there are turns, you're not like flooring it into them. Um, to me, that's more like using a car like a toy, less of a tool. And to me, most people drive cars as tools and they want some. I mean, a lot of people buy cars that have a little bit of a sporty nature, and EVs are very fast and low center of gravity. And I would still argue have pretty decent handling, but I guess that's not enough for some people. Some people really want it to be super light and not have a low center of gravity. But I just hate going to the gas station with a passion. And I love efficiency, which performance cars are the exact opposite of. I hate cars that make noise. I hate dealing with oil changes. Um, I love one pedal driving. I love regen. So, yeah, basically, sports cars are typically gas vehicles that are inefficient, that make noise. It's everything that I hate about cars put into one vehicle. So I don't understand the appeal at all, but you do you. It's a free country. It's his money. He can spend it how he wants. I did not find his articulation on why he liked it very convincing, but it's just his opinion. He's allowed to buy things. We're all different. I'd argue that if you're burning gas to use your car as a toy, you are a tool. Wouldn't call people tools. That's kind of rude. But um, I would say that if you're buying the car out of, this isn't like gonna financially save me anything. It's not better for the environment. It's purely just because I like the way it feels. I don't know. I can't put my brain into that mindset. That mindset doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand. I also don't like roller coasters. I should preface that with. So maybe if you're a big fan of roller coasters, like you're a fan of accelerating really fast into a corner or experiencing some kind of really hard G forces, or I don't know, maybe you like surprising people, like you like someone else being in the car and making them go, "Whoa, oh my God." I mean, that's why a lot of people buy the plaids, but I don't even like the plaids. That's how disconnected I am from the performance market. Is I'm like, Tesla, I don't think you should do plaid powertrains. I think you should focus more on efficiency. I would rather you do a single motor Model S and Model X and see how much better the range can get if you make cheaper versions that are more efficient, but they seem more interested in the performance stuff. Probably because they want to try to fight that narrative. I mean, a long time ago, there was a narrative that EVs are slow, but now I don't think anyone really believes that. EVs are golf carts, and okay, performance EVs have kind of convinced everyone. Okay, the EVs can be fast and very quick and everything, but I don't think I don't I don't know. I've never been a fan of fast cars. I've been in fast cars. I've been in muscle cars. I have relatives that have, old fashioned gas cars and manuals, and I've driven manuals and gone really really fast in them, and I hate it. I don't enjoy it. Um, so it's just not for me. There's been people on Twitter trying to convince me. They're like, "Oh, Drew, you can't say EVs are better because you've never driven a muscle car before." And I'm like, "Trust me, that wouldn't change my mind." Um, I don't watch the Fast and Furious movies. I find them cringy. I don't I don't like when cars rev up and make a loud noise. That doesn't do anything for me. I don't get any satisfaction. Some people love that. Some people go to car shows and look at all the engines and go, "Yeah, look at that noise." And that makes them feel good, and I hate it. To me it's just the sound of inefficiency. It's the sound of poison gas flooding the atmosphere. That's all I hear. I don't get any satisfaction from it. Um, Driving Aptera in those canyons will probably be fun. I had a great time driving the Aptera, and I even floored it a few times. Um, I floored it uphill, and it was faster than my car. It goes the Gamma prototype is all-wheel drive, which does 0 to 60 in about 4.5 seconds, something like that. My Model 3 does 0 to 60 in about 6 seconds, and I could tell it was noticeable. I was like, okay, here we go. I was like, this is nuts. I was like, this thing is so efficient, but can still pack a punch, and I love the sound it makes. Um, I was thinking about it all day because I had to drive my Model 3 all the way back home from San Diego after we test drove it. And I just kept thinking about how much bigger the Model 3 felt and how much more efficient. And honestly, there's some visibility advantages. I really love the window design of the Aptera. It goes downward more into the door so you can see the wheel pant, whereas the Model 3 window is very flat. And I know some people are like, but there's a line in the window. And I'm like, you don't notice it when you're driving around. It's just this big open, kind of goes down, the windshield down, tapers downward more. And I loved that right on the screen, I could see the solar um, energy being generated in real time. I was like, this is so cool. I would be looking at that all the time. Uh, and then going into the software team and looking at all the work they I can't wait for you guys to see what I saw. Okay, there's just so much cool stuff that I can't talk about yet. I didn't sign a contract for the record. They just asked me not to talk about it, and I want to be respectful of them. There's a lot of software stuff that I was like, that is so cool. Um, Many tools drive cars. That's very true. The market seems to be slightly leveling out from the increasing and rapid adoption of EVs, albeit primarily due to miseducation of EV cons and or culture shift. I think it has a lot more to do with interest rates. EVs tend to be cheaper to own than gas cars, but that does usually result in a higher upfront cost, and EVs tend to have a higher upfront cost and they're reliant more. I don't think it's purely misinformation. I think misinformation is more confirmation bias than anything. I don't think it's like what I'm trying to say is I don't think a government educational program on EVs or any amount of advertising is going to change that. I don't think Tesla should spend money on fighting misinformation on EVs because I don't think it would help. All it would do is make people who already own EVs feel justified, and people who don't want to own EVs will say it's propaganda. Like it's not going to change their mind. Affordability, I think, is still at the main forefront, and accessibility. Like a lot of people can't charge from home. I think Aptera addresses both of those issues more than anything. And I also think Aptera would get a huge wave of new reservations once deliveries begun, and once some third-party YouTuber reviews start coming forward where people say, "Hey, I'm not paid by Aptera. I'm not doing a sponsorship or partnering with them or anything. I just bought this, and here's what it costs. Here's how far it goes. Here's how efficient it is. Here's how cheap it is to run." And once the numbers start becoming real to people, and it's no longer just this, well, hypothetically, here's what the efficiency is. No, once the real world data comes out, I think a lot more people are going to get on board with it. Just a few months ago, I rode the Ferrari world's fastest roller coaster. I loved it. I have a 1982 Corvette. I love it. I also have a 2014 RAV4 EV. Love it. Well, there you go. You can enjoy both. Good for you. That's to your advantage. If I don't enjoy something, that's my loss. Try to remind people that. There's a lot of movie critics out there that think they're like heightened or smart because they appreciate only a very specific type of movie. And it's like, in reality, the guy that goes out and watches all kinds of movies and loves all of them, he's having a much happier life. It's to his advantage if he can watch, dumb popcorn movies and enjoy them. So, people, if you got high standards, it's usually to your disadvantage. Um, the first time I pulled a little hard with someone else in the car, I didn't realize they were drinking, so she accidentally snorted her energy drink. I felt bad, but it was pretty funny. Yeah, some people enjoy that kind of thing. I've been in the car. I've had friends that do that are just like, hey, watch this. They slam it into the corners and they do all this crazy stuff. Some people really appreciate that. I'm not one of them. My wife's not one of them. My parents aren't one of them. They're just like, wow, great. I feel sick. Thanks. That was wonderful. The confirmation bias definitely has more of an effect. Precisely. Thank you. Yeah, I think it looks like a misinformation problem on the surface. But I would much rather, as a Tesla shareholder, I'm not selling, although I thought about it last night, honestly. Everything Elon's been saying lately, I'm not feeling too great about Tesla in the moment. Um, I'm not going to sell yet. However, I have, I'm not saying I think Tesla's doomed. I'm just starting to open my mind more and more to the concept that maybe Tesla is overvalued, which I used to not think that. I used to think like, oh, no, 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 no. Tesla's going to grow up and grow big. But I'm starting to wonder maybe they are a car company. I mean, they're an energy company. I don't think they're going to stop with Powerwall and solar, and the Supercharger network is a huge business for them because it's now just not Tesla's. But Tesla basically owns the gas stations. That's how Corey Strubin worded it on Monroe Live. The future is electric, and we're going to need lots of DC fast chargers in the future, and Tesla owns most of them. And they will probably continue to own and operate most of them. There's a bunch of business advantages there. I think they will continue to dominate the US automotive market. But now BYD is kind of picking up some traction. BYD surpassing them in full EV sales. And I think we've said in the past on the podcast and stuff, like the only way Tesla is not going to be number one is if they start making some really bad decisions, if they start making some real weird mistakes. And I'm wondering if keeping Elon at the company or betting so hard on robo taxis and full self driving might be one of the biggest missteps of the company. Like that might be the crack. That might be the what's the term? Achilles heel. Achilles, great strong warrior. Tesla, great strong company. What's the Achilles heel? Is in if you don't know the old story, I think it's a Greek or something. It's an old Odyssey. Uh, Achilles was dumped into the lake of the gods. It was like this pond or this river that gave you godlike power that made you indestructible. And he was held by his heel, his foot, the ball end of his foot, and he was held there and dipped in. So all of him was godlike with this indestructible power, except for that heel, which didn't quite go all the way under. And eventually in battle, that heel was attacked, and that's where the expression Achilles heel comes from. And I wonder if Elon is the Achilles heel. I mean, he's necessary to get the company started, but seeing him want more voting control because he's convinced that Tesla is an AI and robotics company. And just look at the revenue. Look at how Tesla makes their money. I think there's a chance they're not an AI and robotics company. I think Elon wants them to be. I think he wants full self-driving to replace the need for car ownership, and he's convinced that we don't need. They talk about this in Walter Isaacson's book on Elon Musk. If you read the chapter about the robotaxi, there's very specific wording that Franz and Lars and other people in Tesla's board were very compelled and interested in making a cheaper car, like a $25,000 affordable mass market vehicle. And it's documented pretty closely that Elon doesn't have much interest in selling a cheaper car because the product doesn't excite him. He's like, that's not very interesting. All you're doing is making a cheap car. That's not cool. That's partly why I don't think Tesla's or Elon is very interested in diversifying the product lineup, like why there's not much talk about a cyber SUV. He's more interested in the robotaxi future. Because he believes that we're not going to own cars in the future. So he's betting everything on we're going to figure out full self driving, we're going to figure out FSD, and then we won't have to sell cars. We're just going to sell robotaxis, rides. We're going to own all the robotaxis ourselves and just sell rides to people. And I every year start to get a little bit more bearish on this whole when is FSD going to be done thing because Elon won't stop saying later this year, maybe next year, later this year. And it seems like there's a denial of reality going on here where it's like, okay, how long do you want to keep this up, Elon? Like, are we going to get to the point where it's been 10 years of next year? It's going to happen. I promise. I swear. Price of full self-driving, it's always going to go up. It's an appreciating asset. And then Actually, we're going to lower the price because not that many people are buying it. I would not be shocked if they lower the price of FSD again. Just purely from a business model, it's not a bad idea to lower the price, because if you can get a higher take rate at $5,000, you might make more money from full self-driving at 5,000 than 10,000. Because if it's $10,000 and no one wants to buy it, you're not going to sell that much. But it's 5,000 and a bunch of people could justify it. You might you might generate more revenue that way. So that kind of goes against this whole FSD is an appreciating asset narrative, and they're trying to. I think Elon needs to only work. Elon never likes to stay on one idea, one project for very long. I mean, that's why they did the Cybertruck, because he was like, I can't just do another boring vehicle. I can't just do a truck that looks like every other truck. I need to make it feel like I'm working at a startup. He needs to be constantly rethinking everything in order to justify spending time on it, which helps when you're trying to start up a company and get it off the ground. It's great in the early days of Tesla, early days of SpaceX, to get a company running, to get it off the ground. You need a radical thinker like Elon. But this problem that I think we're seeing is Tesla is reaching a point where they're not a startup anymore. Elon's trying to convince himself that Tesla is still a startup so that he can apply his radical first principles thinking. So for a while that was FSD. We need to find a way to make the car drive itself, and robo taxis. That's the future. And then when that doesn't go anywhere and that doesn't make much progress, okay, what do I do? What do I do? Well, Elon, could we just focus on making cheaper cars, or cars that fit the wider demographic of the people? No, 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 no. That's not the problem. That sounds boring. I don't want to make a Tesla minivan. That sounds boring. I need to do something right. Oh, Tesla bot. Okay, how about all this full self-driving stuff? We can apply that to a humanoid robot, and that's going to replace the labor force. We're going to have robots doing everything in the future. That sounds more crazy. That sounds more radical. The odds are stacked against him. Tesla making an SUV, Tesla making a minivan, that's obvious. Clearly, that'll work. Clearly, if Tesla designs a minivan, lots of people will want it and buy it, and you'll probably have decent margins on it. It'll look aerodynamic and fun. That's boring. He doesn't like that kind of stuff. He likes crazy, radical stuff. And that's why he attempted Tesla in the first place. That's why he attempted SpaceX. Everyone said that couldn't be done. Everyone said the odds were against him. So that's all he kind of wants to pursue. Neuralink, Boring Company, Twitter, all that stuff is all just like radical, crazy ideas that everyone says, oh, no, it can't be done. Okay, I want to do that. He doesn't like pursuing he doesn't like taking the easy route. But sometimes when you're running $1 trillion company with millions and millions of investors, and they're looking for steady, regular, increasing profits, you kind of need someone that's all hands on deck, that's not distracted with other companies. I mean, someone who's just a diversified guy. I mean, look at Apple and Tesla as a great example. Apple and Tim Cook. Steve Jobs was the product guy. He wanted to do radical new products like the iPad and the iPhone and the iPod. But he was so obsessed with the product, he didn't really care how much the company performed. The company did perform pretty great later when he came back, but Tim Cook took it to all new heights because Tim Cook was the supply chain guy. Tim Cook was able to diversify Apple's product lineup. And look at how well Apple has done since Tim Cook took over. And I think Tesla's reached a point where they need to just be a electrification powerhouse that specializes in the transition to electric vehicles. That was their original mission statement, right? Let's not detract from that. The mission statement from Tesla was not about replacing the labor force. The mission statement was accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. I think they've achieved that. Even if Tesla doesn't grow at all for another year, they've still transitioned the entire EV landscape. So many people can now see the light. They can all see that EVs are the future because of Tesla's doing. And I don't think that can ever be taken away from them. Whether Elon's there or not, Tesla is still the reason EVs are going mainstream. And that's happened. That's not speculative. That's real. A Model Y best-selling car in the world, and it's going to continue to grow in popularity. I love it. I drive it. I know people that have switched and love it. It's a fact. And because Tesla's achieved their mission statement, I think Elon should leave. I think he should focus on other things that can be more in the startup phase and be more radical and can challenge him. And He can do what he wants to do. I think he should spend way more time at SpaceX, honestly. SpaceX has not achieved their mission statement. SpaceX's mission statement was to make life multiplanetary. Hasn't been done. So I'd say put all your time and focus on that. Like, Tesla is done, basically. They're ready. They're done with the startup, like, Elon accelerator phase. Elon is an accelerator. He gets companies moving and gets things started really fast and starts making good progress. Elon's good at starting things. I don't think he's great at sustaining things. Um, and if he's not working on some kind of radical startup idea, he doesn't want to work on it. So I think Tesla's ready to. They've got an amazing team between Lars, Drew Baglino, Franz van Holzhausen, Tom Zhu. There's just an incredible board of directors and incredible chief of staff at Tesla that is. I think most of the great things Tesla has done lately are they're doing, not Elon's. Elon, from what I can tell, most of his time is being spent on Twitter, um, SpaceX. I mean, majority Twitter, honestly. But I don't think most of his time at Tesla has been on full self driving and bot stuff, which hasn't really brought in much revenue, in my opinion. The main revenue driving force from Tesla has been the cars, how great the battery packs are, how great the supercharger network is, and Elon doesn't have much to do with that. That's mostly Drew Baglino doing the battery management stuff and the cell production and the cell management and the superchargers. And most of the Cybertruck mass production was, orchestrated by Lars and Franz. That was all engineering stuff. And Elon doesn't, most of what Elon said at the Cybertruck unveiling didn't really end up happening. I think Elon comes in because he's so busy, he's working on so many things. He just shows up and says, "Here's what I think you all should do," and then he leaves. And then all of the Tesla people scramble to appeal to Elon's wishes. At least that's the way Lars was describing it during the Cybertruck press rounds. Lars was kind of complaining about Elon, honestly, in those interviews. He was like, Elon came in and said we had 90 days to build a prototype. So we had to throw together the Cybertruck prototype in 2019. He wanted to do all these crazy things. And then once production came around, we had to figure out how to do all of it. And we had to scrap a bunch of the Cybertruck stuff that Elon was pitching, like the headlight design, like the sail storage or the tailgate ramp, um, the 6 seat option, all these things that Elon was like, you guys should all do that. And then he leaves. And then everybody at Tesla has to, okay, how do we manufacture it? Oh, this exoskeleton concept isn't as simple as we thought. Okay, let's just make it look like the Cybertruck we unveiled, but we're going to build it like a traditional vehicle with more of a body on frame design. And we'll just put steel panels on the outside so that it still looks like it has an exoskeleton, but for the most part, it's just kind of hard steel. And Elon wants it to be bulletproof, but it's actually really inefficient and very expensive to make the whole thing bulletproof. So let's just make the doors bulletproof. And then if we do a cheaper option in the future, those doors will be thinner steel, um, that's lighter weight and less cost, and those won't be bulletproof. It's like, I don't know. I think Elon kind of just keeps coming in and saying, do this crazy thing. Ha, that would be amazing. And then he leaves. And then everybody at Tesla has to go, okay, we got to figure that out. Honestly, the bulletproof steel, that's only on the doors of the Cybertruck, by the way. It's not on any of the rest of the truck. Um, they already said in the video where they're shooting the Cybertruck doors, they said not available on all models, which I believe was Tesla's compromise of saying Elon wants the truck to be bulletproof, so let's make some of them bulletproof. But in actuality, if we're just talking purely from an efficiency standpoint, it would be much cheaper and much easier if we just used 1.3 millimeter steel instead of 1.8 millimeter steel. Elon originally wanted it to be 3 millimeter, but that's way too heavy, way too expensive, and he thought that the exoskeleton design would enable them to push all of the weight to the outside of the vehicle, but it turns out that you can't mass produce the exoskeleton the way Elon thought they could. So I just think he's the idea guy who just comes in and asks for crazy things and pushes the team. And I don't think they really need to be pushed anymore. I think they're good as they are, and they just need to focus on, okay, you've got great products. We're in the scale phase. Now we just need to diversify the product lineup, appeal to a wider demographic of buyers, and keep production flowing. I don't think we need the Elon craziness anymore. Um, Tesla is going to increasingly own the level 2 charging market too. That's true. The universal wall connector is pretty perfect. What are some of the cool software features you can talk about in the Aptera? Uh, the it's not so much the features as it is the layout. I'm a big fan of good software design. That's part of the reason I would buy a Tesla before any other car, like an Ioniq 6, which has great efficiency, and I like the exterior, but I love the Tesla software and the simplicity of it. And the Aptera has just such a good layout for showcasing how much solar you've generated and your maps and your navigation and how they incorporate CarPlay into the UI with your speed and the cameras and just the app. The app is really good, showing you all the information about the car and the controls of the car from the app look really, really nice. It's great. Sorry, I better wrap this up here soon. SD says the amount of time they have been said and it's just not happened. I feel like the issue we have in the US is the fundamental of how we build our city around cars, not humans. Well, we don't build cities. Like that's not how it works. I mean, there are cities, but uh, Americans, like it or not, are in favor of independence, and that means buying your own land. When people buy your own land and you don't have a city telling everybody exactly where and how they live, you're going to have stretched out areas. Also, public transportation is great, but it does not replace the demand for car ownership. Even countries with amazing public transportation still have cars, still have very high demand for cars. There's less demand, but there's still cars. I love public transport, and I'm all in favor of better public transport. And we can shake our fist at the government all day, but it never gets anywhere. For better, for worse, the U.S. government was designed to move very, very slowly, and that involves if there's better city planning techniques or better public transportation you can come up with, that's all great, but the government moves very slowly. So the end result is you're just going to keep shaking your hand. You're just going to keep shaking your fist at them and saying, "Oh, they're not good. They're not good." Okay, keep keep complaining. But at least with cars getting more efficient or, being able to charge them via solar, we have a bit more control over that. We can invest our money in companies that we want to deliver. You can vote with your wallet and buy more products from companies that cater to what you desire. In America, for better for worse, is a independence, freedom focused country, which involves a lot of I don't want to have to take the bus. The bus is stinky. The bus is annoying. That's a schedule I don't want to have to deal with. The bus has to keep stopping for other people to get on and off. I've taken the bus many, many times. It's great. I love public transport. Doesn't change the fact that I want to own my own car. It has no point in all of my times taking public transport when I'm traveling. Went to Hawaii, I took the bus a lot. When I was going to college, I took the bus to college. At no point did I ever get on the bus and say, wow, this is great. I don't want to own my own car. I mean, if someone's on a budget and they can't afford their own car, but they can't afford public transport, that's great. That's, in my opinion, the perfect solution. That's what public transport should be for. But it doesn't change unless you're talking about banning the sale of cars. It's not going to change the fact that people want to own their own car. Um, it's a demand thing, and cars are used for more than just transportation. Why does Elon want control over cars? I don't think it's car. He wants control over Tesla because I think it's a couple of things. It's a power thing. It's a relevance thing. I don't think Elon wants to leave Tesla because he knows that's what everybody knows him from. And also, he gets paid more from Tesla than any other company. So I know he has plans he's said in the past he wants to make life multiplanetary and the missions to Mars are going to be very expensive. So he has all these crazy ideas, whether it's buying Twitter, uh, spending more money on SpaceX if they can't generate enough income to build out their starships, spending more money on Neuralink. He wants to have money. Don't get me wrong. Some people are like, he doesn't care about money. Well, I agree with the aspect that he doesn't care about money for the sake of money, but he does care about power. He wants to have control. And he doesn't want Tesla to vote him out, basically, the board of directors. He doesn't want them to say, Elon, I don't think this full self driving thing is going anywhere. You've been promising it for years. I don't think Robotaxi or the bot is really going to turn into anything. So we would like you to leave the company. And he now has a fairly relatively small stake of Tesla because he sold a bunch of stock to buy Twitter. And my guess, based on his wording here, is that there is some tension on the board. I would not be shocked at all, considering how late he's been on so many timelines, especially when it comes to self driving and the Roadster or the Tesla bot or whatever. I would not be surprised at all if there's a lot of people on Tesla's board that is saying, okay, Elon, we love you. We appreciate all the things you've done for the company, but I think we need to focus on just being more of a car company that also has some energy products like Powerwall and Megapack and solar and the Supercharger network. Let's just focus on cars and energy. I don't think we need to be a robotaxi force. We can try to make the self-driving systems better to sell our cars more, but I think we should stop trying to position the company around we're going to be a tremendous success because we're going to figure out level 5 autonomy. And Elon doesn't like that idea. He doesn't like giving up control, and he wants Tesla to become more of this robotaxi Tesla bot company, and that's just not what it is, and I don't think what it will be. He's got a big ego, and honestly, he's kind of earned it for all the amazing things Elon has achieved. Anybody that achieves the things he has kind of deserves a big ego, but that doesn't mean they're right about everything. Because solving the bot doesn't come with a ton of liability like feature complete FSD. I think the bot will be useful sooner than robotaxis, and it's entirely possible there's a future with robots everywhere, but only level 2 driver assist. Maybe. I also tend to think the bot is a lot more exaggerated. I think its capability is a lot people exaggerate it too much. They think it can do way more than it really can. I mean, just yesterday we had this whole thing again where it's like, "Hey, look, the Tesla bot can fold a t-shirt. Wow, that's amazing." And then afterwards Elon's like, "By the way, it's not doing that autonomously. It's just following some other guy is tracking it with his own hands." And it's like, okay. Some people are very impressed with the progress on that bot. Some people are like, wow, it's already walking. It picked up an egg. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but I've seen robots do this before. And I know that people are like, well, it's different because of the way that they trained it to pick up the egg. And I'm like, okay, I don't care as much about how you achieved a certain task. If the task itself is not that useful or not that valuable, it doesn't matter. The rethinking of neural net training or the rethinking of software engineering and how they got to that point, that only matters if you achieve and obtain tasks that couldn't be done before. We've seen humanoid robots walk. That's not new. I've seen robots pick up eggs. And I think I've even seen machines that can fold clothes. It's like I haven't seen it do anything miraculously impressive personally. Maybe my standards are too high, but I just don't think it's going to disrupt the. I think it's bull chow, is what I call it. It's just like, well, as long as you convince some of the investor market that this thing is going to take over the world, then a bunch of people will pour their life savings because they'll do the napkin math and say, oh, well, if the robot can replace all jobs, that means that Tesla is $100 trillion company. I better put all my stock in them. That's all they're betting on. Whether or not it actually delivers kind of doesn't matter. They just get to inflate the value of the company. As a public company, Tesla will feel tension with Elon, but a visionary will provide the future income paths. I hope so, but I'm not feeling too hopeful about it personally because all Elon seems interested in is FSD and bot. He says Tesla's an AI and robotics company, although none of Tesla's revenue right now is really based on AI or robotics. It's pretty much all based on car sales and energy products, which I wouldn't really consider AI. And most people buying Teslas are not buying full self-driving. And they're having to lower the price of full self-driving because not enough people are buying it. So to me, all evidence is pointing to I don't think Tesla's an AI and robotics company. He should spend time with his kids and leave us alone. Amen. Seriously. Um, Mr. Beast posted his first X video only video yesterday. Yeah, and it's gonna make $1. Twitter revenue is not that great. I'm not a fan of driving to go and do anything. I don't want to drive 5 to 10 minutes just to go to the mall or to anywhere else. I want to be able to walk there as an option. Live in a big city, but then you'll discover that living in a big city is far more expensive than living in rural areas. So all the money you save by not owning a car goes towards your rent. Congratulations. It's not a perfect system either way. My emphasis is that there's a world where cars are useful. There's not going to be someone you vote into office. There's not going to be some perfect way you design a city in which nobody needs cars anymore. Even Northern European climates that are very progressive, like Norway and Finland, they still buy a ton of cars. And they have great public transportation. And they have very progressive governments that are very focused on environmentalism and being more efficient and better city planning, and they still buy cars there. If you want to live in a big city where you don't have to drive anywhere, that's great. You do you. But notice the cost of living. It's not cheaper. Honestly, the cheapest cost of living is you to live in a rural place and buy cheap cars. Big cities tend to be more expensive. Feel free to prove me wrong, though, if you have some place where you think it's cheaper to not own a car but live in a major city that has access to more public transport and everything's in walking distance. I mean, it depends on what you mean by everything. I mean, I live in a pretty rural place and I could walk down to my local convenience store if I wanted to and buy all my groceries from there, but that sounds kind of depressing. Some people want to be closer to friends, family, or they want to travel, or they want to go to different restaurants that offer different foods. It's a freedom thing. Comes down to freedom. Um, I don't have a garage to be able to charge my EV, not an apartment, but in a townhouse that just doesn't have a garage. Can I still own one and keep it decently charged without having to keep going to a supercharger? For the record, SD, I drive the standard range Model 3. I almost never charge from home, mainly because of the free supercharging. But I can go easily a week without supercharging, without plugging in. How often do you drive? I mean, I guess it's a question of how much do you want to pay for your charging because supercharging tends to cost more. Well, just look up the charger in your area, how much is it, and then compare it to the price of gas. Usually it's a little cheaper, may not be a lot cheaper, but um, it could walk by year 1 and talk 2 languages by year 5. Suck it, Octo. Do you keep your Tesla in dark mode 24/7? No, because it's bright in here. I have a white interior and there's a glass roof, so the dark interior isn't. I mean, the black night mode isn't that great when you're driving around in broad daylight. So I kind of appreciate the light mode in that regard. Um, let's just go back to horses. You could do that. Let me know if that's any cheaper. Especially these days, I don't think owning horses is cheaper than owning a car. Actually, you have to shovel the poop. You got to have land for them. You got to feed them. It's a car is honestly cheaper. Thoughts on Cameron Bofa's rant on the Tesla 25K car? I haven't seen it, but I probably agree with a lot of it, to be honest. I watched a video recently speaking on the Tesla full self-driving promises. And, when I was younger, I used to think, okay, maybe one day they'll figure out robo-taxis, but it's going to take longer than they think. And now I'm getting more and more each year into I don't think it's going to happen, which is why I think Tesla should pivot away from that. I don't think they should claim that their business is going to be all built on full self-driving. And in the same way, I don't think we should hold Tesla too high to what they said about someday we're going to deliver a $25,000 car. It's like, maybe to manufacture. There's a lot of Model 3s you can find used for that price. Um, and with incentives, you could probably get a new inventory Model 3, maybe around 30,000 or whatever. But I believe Tesla wants to make cheaper cars, but I think there's a big split in the company right now. Um, they have to present a unified argument. They have to look like they're all on the same team. But my guess is Elon and people who feel really passionately about robotaxis are convinced that they're almost about to crack that code. But I bet there's a huge section of Tesla's company that's like, I think we need to rethink our strategy a bit here. I think we need to move away from claiming that this is going to be level 4, level 5 within the year because this isn't going anywhere. And Elon keeps. How much time is not being spent on full self driving because they are now focusing on Tesla bot? Can you say no? Can you deny that? How is time designated to the Tesla bot not taking away from because it's neural net training, it's software engineering and some hardware engineering. But how is all that neural net training and stuff not taking away the time that needs to go towards making FSD feature complete? Was I happy with Marquez's response to Aptera video? Yeah, generally. I mean, I think he's still a little bit misinformed, which isn't really his fault because he's a big YouTuber and he can't research every startup company. He only wants to review and talk about companies that exist that have products on the road. But I was very happy that he commented because he said that he would love to check it out. He wants them to prove him wrong. And he believes all of their efficiency claims, which I think is saying something. I think that says a lot of faith in the company that, MKBHD wants to check out the product and he believes that they can achieve the numbers they're suggesting. That's a huge win in my book. The only thing I disagree with is he claims in that comment, he says, I just don't think there's a business model to sustain the company. He says, I don't think there's enough demand for a vehicle like the Aptera to keep the company afloat. I disagree with that. Maybe if he would have acknowledged or known that they have over 46,000 reservations and that they use very small battery packs, so they don't need to sell as many of those in order to turn a profit as, say, a Rivian or a Lucid might. Have I heard of EV Match? Super helpful for people like me who don't have the option for home charging and can't use Tesla chargers. I haven't, but it sounds cool. Still thinking Aptera would be nice. Solar charging just at your house and not having to run an extension cord out to the car and plugging in via 110 outlet and getting, hundreds of miles of range back overnight through the same charger you use to charge your phone. Um, yeah, Tesla didn't deliver the $39,000 Cybertruck, and it took them years to deliver a $35,000 Model 3, and then it was like on a technicality. Now maybe with inflation they've hit 35,000, but it's still a stretch. So I would not be shocked if the compact car or whatever the next gen vehicle platform is probably won't start at 25K. Probably will start at like 35K, and then over time they'll work their way down. And eventually they'll get down to like 25K. And then maybe used, you'll be able to buy it for 18K. But what would really be game changing, I think, is not necessarily just a 25K because that's cheap for a new car, but it's not really cheap for the masses. A lot of people buy used. And if we can get to a point where a new EV or a slightly used EV can get into the $15,000, $10,000 price range, which I think Aptera is closer than anybody because they have such a simple, basic manufacturing design. And if they started switching to more sodium ion based batteries or LFP batteries with, because, I know a lot of people like my other friend Mike with the Model Y, he wants the lowest range Aptera. He's in it for the efficiency. He's not buying it as a road tripper. He's not interested in the high range options, which is understandable. I know a lot of people that wouldn't want a road trip in the Aptera, but um, I think there's a huge market for pretty much every trim they have. The high range ones I could see being high in demand because a lot of people want, they don't want to spend 50, $60,000 on an EV, but they do want 400 miles of range. Or some people just want as much range as possible, like me. They'll just take the 1,000-mile range variant. But some people are just going to be using this thing for commuting. They're just going to drive to work and back, in which case, yeah, 250 miles of range is probably overkill. I could visualize Aptera making a 150-mile range variant with a 15 kilowatt hour battery pack. Can you imagine how cheap that thing would be to build? Maybe even doing a rear wheel drive variant. It might not be very fast and it might not have the best handling. But if you just had one motor and maybe take off some of the solar cells to keep it cheaper, but it's super lightweight and it's using super cheap batteries that don't require iron or sorry, that don't require nickel or cobalt, or maybe that don't even require lithium. Can you imagine how cheap a car that could be just to run and then also up front? Like, dang, you talk about like a $20,000 EV that almost costs nothing to run. That's 5-year ownership cost. That would be the equivalent of like a $10,000 gas vehicle. That that would be insanely profitable. A subcompact EV would be a great thing to be around. The Aptera is a great step. I don't think the size is as important as the price because a subcompact or something really small like a smart car is not that aerodynamic once you get up to highway speed, which a lot of people go on highways. The Aptera is basically as aerodynamic as you can get if you build a vehicle with two seats that are next to each other, um, with that shape. There's not really any way. I'm doing a lot of research on aerodynamics for this video I'm working on with the Aptera, and it really is quite genius. The design, um, very functional in terms of aero and efficiency, and a subcompact that still has four wheels that gets shorter and shorter and gets like smart car like. Um, the aerodynamic drag gets progressively larger because it still has a pretty big frontal area compared to a sedan, and then it's very blocky. When you have a big drop off on the back, like you do on a lot of subcompact cars, that creates this pressure zone on the back, and it's not as gentle to the air. So I don't think the future to affordable EVs is making them shorter, like squeezing up the wheelbase, making them look more smart car like. I think it's making them look more aerodynamic because that's ultimately going to be more efficient, which is why I'd say vehicles, whether it be the Aptera or not, are vehicles like that are more teardrop shaped and have more tapered designs and have less seats and are more lightweight and have low profiles with small frontal areas, or kind of like the Honda Saloon we saw. I was glad to see Steve from Aptera Owners Club also did a video on that. It's such a cool design, and I bet it has a really low drag coefficient. I think aerodynamic efficiency is the future. Most compacts are below CD of 0.028. I don't think they're that low. I think you mean 0.28, which is still higher than a Model 3. But it's not just about coefficient of drag. Coefficient of drag is one figure, but it is not your end all be all. Like the Tesla Semi, for example, has a lower drag coefficient than a Bugatti Chiron or whatever they call it. That doesn't mean that the Tesla Semi is more efficient than the Bugatti in terms of aero. It's your total drag number. I need to find the official term for it, but your total drag ratio is based on your coefficient of drag, which is a measurement of the shape, times the frontal area. So if your coefficient of drag is 0.28, but your frontal area is the same as a Model 3 or close to the Model 3, it's not going to be more efficient than a Model 3. Whereas if you get your coefficient of drag, like an Aptera, down into the 0.13, um, then and Aptera has a pretty small frontal area as well. Even though it's wide, it's very limber. It's very skinny. There's a lot of space around that width. Um, that enables it to get 10 miles per kilowatt hour. Will BYD ever come to the U.S.? I think that's more of I'm sure they would like to, but the U.S. government has all these rules and requirements for Chinese automakers that it's probably not going to be very profitable for them to. Um, Next level up from Aptera on efficiency would be an enclosed motorcycle. An Italian company, I think, is making one. You have seen it. I haven't seen it, but motorcycles create a different level of issues. I think what we're all kind of trying to debate is what do we really need? Because whenever you try to make a more efficient vehicle, you have to compromise in some way, right? Like my Model 3 has a lot less range than my gas car, but it's more efficient and the battery pack is heavier, but I enjoy it more and it costs more, but I'm willing to because it's a nice car and I enjoy the comfort and everything of it. With the Aptera, we're getting more than twice as good efficiency than a Model 3, but we take out the second row. Um, I don't think you miss much on safety or anything else. It's got great software. It's very comfortable and very nice to drive. It's a bit wider, so it might be a little awkward to park or get into some tight spaces, but overall, it's still a fairly similar driving experience to what most people are doing. And I would argue that the most common driving setup that people are comfortable with is, yeah, they want it to be enclosed. They want HVAC. It's different if you tell people to ride bikes everywhere because sometimes it's raining and people don't want to show up at their destination soaking wet, or sometimes it's super cold or snowing and people don't want to be super cold, or of course biking is more dangerous when you're on the road with other cars. So you want to be in a vehicle that's safe. I personally believe the Aptera vehicle is quite safe, despite what your gut might tell you. There's a lot of safety emphasis built into that design already, passive and active safety systems. But the most common use case is for a vehicle, how most people are transporting themselves is they're sitting in a seat with HVAC controls, with music. They have pedals and a steering wheel. They don't have to straddle something. They don't have to use handlebars like this and lean certain directions as they turn. No, you just sit, hands on the wheel, and your pedals drive around. That's how we're driving most of our cars. Even people driving F-150s are usually just moving themselves and one other person around, using all this extra energy, moving all this extra weight, and displacing all this extra air. And I feel like the Aptera is the closest to that experience that everyone's used to and comfortable with. Still has the high range of a gas car. 400 miles is about what most gas cars can do. Some do more, and the Aptera can too. But the Aptera Launch Edition, 400-mile range, you're still enclosed. You don't need a helmet. You don't need a handlebar. You still have HVAC. You still have music. And if one person joins you, they don't have to sit behind you, which just creates another level of awkwardness. And that kind of dives into the whole Arcimoto discussion we're going to have later. Um, Look up Julian Edgar and his series on aerodynamics. Okay, I should look that up. With the horror stories about EV repair costs these days, do you think Aptera's right to repair policy give it an eventual sales advantage? Yeah, I think already. I've talked to many people in the Aptera community, both on Reddit and on Discord, and most of them are not cross-shopping it with the Tesla, which is the funny thing. Most Tesla fanboys, which is funny because I consider myself one, but I need a different term. Tesla elitists, people who think Tesla is the only way, like you can only buy Teslas and nothing else can be good. Most Tesla people I've talked, Tesla elitists I've talked to about Aptera say that no, it won't compete. If no one would buy an Aptera if you could buy a Tesla for $5,000 more, $10,000 more, whatever. And I'm like, most of the people I know with Aptera reservations are not cross shopping it with a Tesla. Most of them were cross shopping it with gas cars because the most common, I want to say about 75%, maybe more like 80%. This will probably change over time because I think the cheaper Aptera will be more compelling in the long run. But at least in the short run, the main reason people are interested in it right now is the higher range. Um, it's like 75% of people who reserved an Aptera wanted one with 400 miles of range or more. It was, excuse me, most of the reservations at like 60% were for the 400-mile range variant. And then after that, the more popular option was the 600-mile range, the 1,000-mile range. A lot of people wanted 400, 600,000-mile range variants. Kind of the least popular one was the cheaper one, the 250-mile range. So I was like, the people who are interested in this EV are the people who don't want to compromise on that. And all the cheap Teslas that people are cross shopping with, well, that's about the price of a Model 3. That's close to the price of a Model 3 or a Model Y. Yeah, those cars are going 250, 260 miles. Aptera's going 400 plus on most of their trims. And a lot of people are interested in the Aptera because of right to repair or because of the CarPlay emphasis or because of the solar charging and they can't charge it from home. It's a diverse market. Just look at any roadway. There's cars everywhere and they're not all the same. Some people buy F-150s, some people buy Rams, some people buy Silverados, all for small little differences. There doesn't have to be a big difference between car models for people to buy one brand over the other. And I think a lot of people that I've talked to in my personal life will straight up just not buy a Tesla because they don't like Elon. I've heard that before. Or some people don't like no gear stocks on Teslas, or they don't like um, the design, or they don't like the ethos, or they don't like the repair costs or whatever. Yeah, so I totally agree. I think that the repairability emphasis in a right to repair company could easily win over a bunch of right to repair advocates. Um, Let the radical people be called fanboys. I consider myself a Tesla enthusiast. I don't know. I still feel like a fanboy. I'm just, I'm a fanboy that's in love with other companies too. I'm not exclusive to Tesla. I love Aptera. I love Rivian. I love Tesla. I mainly like Tesla's cars, Tesla's batteries, their charging, their interior design, their exterior design. I think Teslas are beautiful. I like their efficiency focus, which is, of course, why I'm also a big fan of Aptera. Did Dirty Tesla actually use your referral code? No, I don't think so. I think he was joking. I was joking. Um, there was just a guy named Chris that I thought, hey, this would be funny. If I tagged him and said, hey, he used my code. I did not. Sorry. Um, let's see. ESC is underrated, in my opinion. So much flexibility. Um, I need to find that one. I think I've heard of enclosed motorcycles, but I just think there's too many compromises and it doesn't really replace a lot of people's use for a car, whereas the Aptera does. I'm pretty much convinced like the Aptera's only compromise is it's a two-seater, which I think could be stretched to a three-seater, but um, I won't I won't put words in Aptera's mouth. Have I heard any information on the repair ease of the Tello? Another right to repair company. Love the Tello. Um, from what I understand, they should be pretty easy because they're mostly relying on contract manufacturing. But no, we didn't talk too much about that. Tello's just so early in their production process. Um, they don't even really have a alpha prototype at this. I mean, they have an alpha prototype, but there's no exterior. So they're very, very early in development. So their stance on right to repair is kind of probably basic, and I don't know if they have much to be decided. But the point is, they're building their car mostly with off-the-shelf components and parts. They're relying on third parties to manufacture almost all of it, which means that buying those parts from those suppliers should be pretty simple, I would imagine. But no, we don't have a lot of confirmation. Whereas Aptera has been a lot more public and a lot more straightforward about that and said, we're designing this part of the vehicle specifically so that it can be easily serviced and, trying to make sure that everything is accessible and simple. And there's a lot that goes into the aspects of the design to make it repairable. Like the whole wheel cover access thing. If you could change one thing about your Tesla, what would it be? Oh man, I have so many ideas. Um, I mean, CarPlay would be nice. I really have liked what I've seen about the CarPlay stuff. I guess if I could only pick one thing, a concept that I've seen. So my car, on a good day, if it's a good weather and I'm not driving crazy, I can get like my last drive. My last drive just across town was 189 watt hours per mile. That's what it says right here. That's more than 5 miles per kilowatt hour. So if I could take something from the Aptera, see, it's pretty much just Aptera is my dream vehicle. So I'm questioning what could I bring from the Aptera over to my Model 3. If I could absolutely cover my Model 3 with solar cells, like the Aptera has, put solar cells on the dashboard, put solar on the hood, put solar on the roof, all the way back to the end. If we just had solar cells all over it, and let's say maybe I get 600 watts worth of solar, I would sacrifice the glass roof. I don't use it that much. It's cool for the backseat passengers, but that's okay. I'd be willing to sacrifice the glass roof for solar. Um, if we just absolutely covered the Model 3 with solar and I got maybe 600 watts on there or 700 watts on there, and let's say I get 3 kilowatt hours ish a day by leaving it in the sun, then 3 kilowatt hours. And if a lot of my drives are around 5 to 4 miles per kilowatt hour, that would be like 15 miles of range um, for free. Some days I don't even drive that much, so it could stack up. There's some days I work from home a lot of the time. So there's some times where I don't drive the car at all, so there would be like 2 days worth. So I could get like 30 miles of free energy just by leaving my car out. And also, we take big trips quite often throughout the year. Sometimes we go overseas and we'll be gone for months. So if there was a way for me to just leave the car out and it can charge itself, I don't have to worry about phantom drain and it can power itself. Um, Model 3 solar probably only need the roof. Well, you need as many as possible for it to be worth it. I mean, if you just get, you know, 100 watts on there, you're not going to notice any meaningful range added back. But if there was a way for me to get, 15, 20 miles of range added back per day for free, that would be great. I would love it. Um, CarPlay has much better music streaming UI, and I think the navigation is much better. I've had so many more stupid routes navigated through the Tesla route planner, opposed to when we just pull up it on my phone with Apple Maps. Apple Maps is just better, and it's getting better, and it's free. And Tesla wants me to pay to see traffic lights and stop signs on my route. It's like, okay, give me a break. So if I could change one thing, I would just absolutely cover the car in solar cells. and then leave it in the sun and get free juice. That sounds awesome. I'm still shocked that there aren't more companies doing that. Like, electric vehicles are the only vehicles that can actually make that work, where you charge it from sunlight. You can't self power a gas car. You can't self power a hydrogen car, but you can self power a EV just through sunlight. And very few companies are attempting that. Aptera feels like the only one. And yeah, it's like, why can't more people be doing this? This is a good idea. Yeah, just to get rid of the vampire drain, the phantom drain, whatever you want to call it, would be helpful. Just something to help offset the power usage of Sentry mode, or the computer being actively used in the background. Just to have a trickle charge going. You leave your car at the airport for a week. It would be nice if you came back and it had more juice than you left it with. Whereas right now, where people are worried that when they get to their destination and their car's left outside, it's going to use up energy and drop down and lose all of its battery. So when you get back to the airport, now you can't drive anywhere. Um, I don't want a module. I've seen those CarPlay modules. I don't like the look. I don't even like the concept of those phone mounts that you hold up. I want CarPlay on the main display. It's just a poor use of space, in my opinion, to have like the CarPlay module, especially the ones behind the steering wheel. Those look terrible. I've had so many companies offer me those and say, "Hey, do you want to try this?" And I'm like, "That looks disgusting." I want it on that screen, and I don't want the full self-driving visualization. That's basically pointless. And um, I would like if I could keep the repeater cameras up at the top. Basically, after I tried the Aptera, I was like, "This is how it should work." I should have the I should have no side mirrors. I want to take my mirrors off to improve my frontal area and have better aerodynamics. And I want to have those repeater cameras in there so I can see in my blind spots. And they're constantly available so you can always see them. And then I want the main display to just be music and CarPlay and your speed and all the basics. Turn off Sentry mode at home, turn off cabin overheat during less hot months, turn off background, app refresh. I've done all that stuff. Trust me, doesn't change the fact that I would want solar. Say three negative things about Aptera. Why? Um, I wish they would let you lock in your pricing if you invested over 2,000. I think that's fair. It's a shame that it's only a two-seater. I wish it had more seats. Otherwise, it could be like the last car I ever need. And this is kind of a cheat, but I'd say it doesn't exist yet. It's not in production. That's a negative. Um, I guess that what's another thing? They've been late. They thought they would be in production by now, and they're not. That sucks. But everything's late, so yeah, there's negative things to say about any startup. It's easy to just look at a startup which hasn't delivered a product yet and say, "See, they haven't delivered anything." It's like, okay, well, if we had that mentality towards anything, you're going to be against every new idea that ever comes out on the market. That means that you only believe established companies can come up with new products and services. There can't be any new companies, basically, is what that means, which is a little ridiculous. So yeah, there's drawbacks. I'm sure they acknowledge that. It's kind of wide. Sometimes when I'm in a tight parking space, I think, oh, this would be even tougher. And in the Aptera, I wonder if I'm going to be able to park here. But truthfully, I'm going to park differently in the Aptera because most of the time with my Model 3, I'm trying to park in a shady spot to not overheat the car. With the Aptera, I'm going to intentionally park in sunny places. Aptera is like the perfect woman. She is pretty but doesn't exist. Well, the Gamma prototype does. So I got to drive that. That experience can't be taken away from me. That was so much fun, and it was such a great day. Meeting people, talking about cars, and talking about software and the design, and getting so many of my questions answered, and looking at the factory floor. Drew, do you think Tesla without Elon would be better? Apple without Steve has been more successful. I'm at that stage of life, yes. I wouldn't have said the same 5 years ago. I think there was a time where Tesla needed Elon, and that time has passed. I think we're now at the point where Tesla needs their Tim Cook. I think Drew Baglino is the Tim Cook. Um, they need someone who just diversifies the product lineup and just focuses on ramping production. They need a scalability guy, not a radical rethinker, which is what Elon is. Elon needs to be in startup mode all the time, which is why he's going after robots and FSD and robotaxis because he can only. That's why he did the Cybertruck instead of a boring pickup truck, which I think was a good idea. But there's only so many new models you can come up with. I don't think Elon wants to come up with a new model. Like I don't think Elon would be excited by a cyber SUV or anything like that. But yeah. Here in Norway, the Tesla had over 20% of the new car sales in 2023. Model Y had 17%. Tesla sold more than the next four car brands together in 2023. Yeah, they're crushing it. I don't think they'll die, but I do wonder if the valuation or the stock market will level out with them because Elon leaves or gets mad at the board or something. Looks like Lightyear is shelving developing an EV, now just going to develop solar cells for vehicles, joining Sono Motors. Here's hoping Aptera is more successful. I know. I know, it's sad. And Sono's was their vehicle was way too expensive anyway. I'm kind of understanding why they didn't make it. I'm not planning on getting a Highland Model 3, no. It's cool. I think it's the best car you can buy. It's the best car in production. I'll put it that way. It's basically the best Tesla, but it's not quite the cheapest. Um, but yeah, if we pretend the point of sale tax credit doesn't exist, Model 3 rear wheel drive, best car, period. Um, any thoughts on full self driving V12 possibly coming later this month? They're switching the whole system from C code to an AI video trained model. I know, I don't think that's a good sign. It's like, okay, so all these years of development for nothing. You reached another local maximum, and now we're supposed to believe that version 12 is going to be better. I haven't seen evidence that it's much better. I've seen some testimonials from Tesla employees saying that in some ways it's better, in other ways it's worse than V11. So it's the same old, same old. Nothing's changed. It's been 4 years now of full self-driving beta where people say, "Oh well, sometimes it's pretty good, other times it's really stupid." Now with V12, which has been delayed and delayed and delayed, we're still saying, "Well, still not quite there yet, but it's getting good." It's like we're going to be doing this endlessly. We could be ranting about V13 next year and talking about, well, V13 is a fundamental rewrite from the ground up. It's going to change everything. I remember this exact same terminology about V10. V10 is going to change everything. V11 is actually crazy. The V11 is basically perfect. Now we all got V11 and it's like, actually it's not that great. V12 though, V12 is going to change everything. How long are we going to do this? Until Tesla starts assuming liability, I'm not convinced that we're close to anything. This is still just a very fancy level 2 system. Do I feel like the 2024 Model 3 looks empty up front without the fog lights? Looks like something is missing? Yeah, a little bit, but it's probably just takes some getting used to. I'd probably get used to it if I had one for a while. I like the look. I think it's a good look. Um, but anyway, I've been streaming over 3 hours now. Jeez, I think it's lunchtime. I'm hopeful that it's supposed to drive more human-like because as of now, it can be quite unpredictable and scary. Yeah, that's exactly what we said 4 years ago. And here we are 4 years later saying the exact same thing. So that's why I don't understand why we think V12 will change that much. Fake self-driving, yeah. It's especially, I don't care how good FSD is. With the NHTSA, we are not getting above level 2. I feel very confident about that right now. At least not with privately owned vehicles. Maybe Tesla does limited robotaxis within specific regions like Google does with Waymo, but that's not the same thing. That's not what they were claiming they were going to do. And that's not a very high revenue model. You wouldn't make much money off of that. I mean, the Boring Company doesn't even have autonomous driving, and that's a closed loop. I've been there. I've seen the tunnel. It's not connected to main roads. All it is a Tesla driving in a circle, and they still have humans doing that. Why? I don't understand why they can't figure out how to make that loop autonomous. That's a private road. They could take off the mirrors, they could take off the windshield wipers, they could make it real simple and cheap, and yet they still have humans driving Teslas through tunnels. Yeah, there's a GM had a robotaxi fleet called Cruise that was banned for causing too many traffic jams and too many accidents, which I do think will slow down the potential of robotaxi rollout because now the few cities that do have them are getting more strict about how they run and operate. And that means it's going to be harder for Tesla to roll out a robotaxi fleet. And right now, the NHTSA is getting mad at basic autopilot, not even FSD. I don't have FSD in my car, and when I use autopilot now, it beeps at me for checking my speedometer. They're angry about my eyes checking my speed. It's ridiculous. So we're not going to get anywhere above level 2 with this government. If the current government was upset with the level 2 system, I don't think it's happening. Seriously. I really wish I was wrong. I want to be proven wrong. It was always my dream to have just a level 3 system. I just wanted the car to do what it wants to do while I relax. I'm okay if I have to be in the car and only take over for 5% of driving. I personally believe the hardware in my car is capable of level 3, but I don't think the government's going to allow it. Um, Carper DM says, after 2 years of FSD in my Plaid X, I have zero hope it will get better. With the oversensitive eye watching, they need to make wheel torque requirements go away. I don't think they can. I think it's a government thing. The government's really strict about it. And sure, we can argue all day that the government's being unfair towards Tesla because they're not as strict with Ford and GM autonomous driving. But yeah, the government's biased. The government has, uh, rubbed elbows with Ford and GM, and they're willing to bail them out, and they're more pro-union, so they're probably more harsh on Tesla than anybody else. But that doesn't change reality. We can complain that it's unfair, but I think Tesla needs to reset expectations. If the government is forcing you to get even more strict about your level 2 system, what makes you think you're going to solve level 3, let alone level 4 or 5, which is a whole nother problem. Um, Yeah, Boring Company's another can of worms. It's way cheaper than a subway system. I know everybody keeps saying the same thing. Just build a subway. Just build a subway. Okay, that was pitched. The city government wanted a underground system to transport people for events, and a subway system was petitioned at $200 million, and the Boring Company said they could do it for 50 million. So the city went with the Boring Company, and it's been mildly successful. It's worked. Yeah, subway can be efficient, but it requires more infrastructure. It requires larger tunnels, more ventilation. It's more expensive. It's that simple. Um, will the Boring Company ever end up like the crazy underground tunnels, like their concept video? Probably not. I think the biggest problem with the Boring Company is not um, cost. It's more just they can't dig tunnels fast enough, and they were expecting to be able to dig tunnels quicker at this point. That's kind of what most of the Boring Company's focus was all on, was just drastically lowering the price of digging tunnels so that you could build more road networks underground. Um, but it's been years, and they haven't really accelerated their digging path. They were hoping to beat the snail. That was their whole thing, was to be able to dig a tunnel faster than a snail could move, and they haven't even hit that yet. And it's been like what, 5 years? So they have another set of problems. The cars in it aren't vans. Yeah, I don't know how many people actually want to get in board with a bunch of strangers, but yeah, the vans would probably help. Again, Tesla, more products needed more. I'm just more confused that they can't find a way to make them autonomous. I feel like that would help out a lot. You'd have more seats in the car if they were autonomous. Oh, it's because Tesla vehicles can't be level 4 autonomous. That's why. The costs always bloat during construction of a subway system, and the maintenance and operation always. Um, I'm not convinced it's cheaper. Lower operational costs, much more longevity. You have to you have to run it for a very, very long time. And the CES thing is more what do you call it? Situational. It's not running at full capacity all the time, in which case you'd have a big train that just sits there doing nothing. It maybe the subway pays for itself if it's constantly running at max capacity all the time, but the Boring Company system would not be. The point is, it was cheaper. I can't blame them. And you'd have to run it for a very, very long time to break even. It's like $150 million cheaper. That's a lot of operational costs. And I don't think driving Teslas in a circle is very expensive. Sorry. Buying new tires for cars is nothing compared to the subway rail system still needs to be maintained and all that. Um, Next year is going to be much better than last. Why do you think it'll be stressful? Anyway, I could do this all day if I'm not careful. I'm going to wrap it up here. My camera's about to die anyway. But thank you all for tuning in. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Take care. Bye bye.